Hello everyone, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto was chosen by the gods of the Shinobi world Part 3? Chattering students sat side by side at desks long enough for groups of 3. Posters with a series of educational messages were posted on the rear wall's blackboard. Several rows of tiered seating overlooked a man behind a podium. He made a single hand gesture, commanding total silence. Iruka Umino clutched a sheet of paper close to his chest, careful not to allow his captivated audience a sneak peek at its contents. His watchful eyes surveyed the room, checking the students who were present against a memorized roster. Varying degrees of discomfort registered in the faces staring back at him. The graduation test is about to begin, he announced. Everyone in the room tensed up, save for 2 students, Sasuke Uchiha at the center desk near the far wall, and Naruto Uzumaki on the right. Of course, the Hokage's boys. Confident as ever, Iruka noted with a faint smile. He glanced down at the paper again. When your name is called, proceed to the next classroom. The test is on the clone jutsu. The test is on the clone jutsu, said the Chunin instructor. He was a tan, lean-muscled man. The prominent scar across his nose was usually hard to look away from, but the words he just spoke did the trick. Naruto held back a gasp and almost fell out of his seat. The clone jutsu. The one he'd learned at 7 years old. Piece of cake. Then again, he, Sasuke, Sakura, and Shikamaru were the only students who'd known how to perform the jutsu before it was covered in class. So it wasn't like this test was all that easy for the average academy class. The 4 of them were simply not average. When called for his turn back when the class had to do a live demonstration, Shikamaru made a clone that was just stable enough to pass itself off as him. It wobbled if you stared at it long enough, but Iruka-sensei was already marking him with a passing grade by the time this happened, and none of the other students were shrewd enough to notice. Unlike the rest of the class, Naruto and Sasuke weren't fooled. They could tell by how fluid Shikamaru's replication of the hand sign sequence was that he'd memorized it long ago, but didn't want the abundance of attention that came with excellence. Naruto rested his chin on crossed arms as he thought back on that day. The very pretty and smart Sakura Haruno, whom he'd expected to be first to recognize Shikamaru's ruse and call it out, let him down. She had been far too focused on watching Sasuke, and to a lesser extent, Naruto himself, to detect anything. Shikamaru could be lazy if he wanted to, but Naruto had other plans. If he was going to fill the shoes of his father, and maintain his reputation as the Hokage's gifted, and really cool, son, he needed to keep training hard and learn all of the jutsu he could. He had intermediate level ceiling and a handful of standard ninjutsu down, but there was more to being a ninja than that. Practice your forms, then I'll take you to Ichiraku, his mother had often said when he was younger. In hindsight, Naruto was grateful for Kushina's insistence on passing down the basic framework of her sealing techniques to him, even if back then he'd found it to be a bother. Learning to make even the most rudimentary Uzumaki seals had demanded so much out of him, it left him starved of chakra whenever he didn't get the formula exact. However, the difficulty of this regimented training bred rapid growth. Naruto's chakra control rivaled that of a genin with several missions under their belt by the time he was 9. Everyone in the village said he had the makings of a Hokage, and while he wasn't all that invested in the idea at first, he didn't hate it. Over time, he'd just come to accept that path for himself as the natural progression of things. He was the child of 2 amazing ninja, after all. It was with this in mind that Naruto sat forward in his chair, eager to hear his or Sasuke's name called. The room was still with the weight of everyone's anxiety, fear, and excitement, the latter, in Naruto's case. He wanted to get this over with and move on to the team selections. Naruto stared hard at the paper in Iruka-sensei's hand, still refusing to believe the final test was something this simple. The clone jutsu. His luck today was just unreal. Iruka-sensei had pretty much eliminated any chance of him not graduating with flying colors. Sensing eyes on him, Naruto looked over his shoulder. Sasuke was smirking at him from his seat. He smiled back, then returned to listening to the names being called. Which team will I end up on? The question lingered, causing him to tune out of the announcements from Iruka-sensei. He glanced at Hinata. She was hunched forward and fidgeting under her desk. Although her nerves seemed to be getting to her, there was a quiet strength in her eyes that refused to fade. Naruto was proud of how far she'd come, and could only hope his best friend would be assigned to his team. When his turn to be tested came, Naruto practically leapt onto his feet and power walked to the next classroom. He high-fived Sasuke on his way past. He was ready. There was no time to waste here. He needed to start completing missions and get stronger. Great job, Iruka said as Naruto dispelled his 5 identical illusions. 1 clone was the minimum requirement. He figured it would be better to make several and get a higher score. You pass. Congratulations, Naruto. Iruka stamped a sheet of paper, and his fellow teacher, Mizuki, gave Naruto a nod of approval. All right, Naruto cheered, raising a fist. I graduated. He approached the desk Iruka and Mizuki sat behind, tensing up at the amused expressions on their faces as he selected one of a few dozen Blue Leaf Village engraved headbands. I mean, it's not like I was scared I wouldn't or anything. Of course not, Iruka said, shaking his head. Anyway, see ya Iruka-sensei, Mizuki-sensei. Naruto hurried from the room, eager to share the news. When he stepped out onto the vast courtyard, a handful of students and their parents were gathered. Some of his classmates were crying or receiving consoling words and a pat on the back. Others were hugging their family members or celebrating in other ways. Amidst these emotional displays, his parents broke through to the front of the crowd, smiling at him. There you are, Naruto. His mother said. Mom, I passed. I knew you would, ya know. Kushina pulled Naruto into a hug, admiring the headband he maintained a white-knuckled grip on. While they hugged, Minato reached out and patted him on the head. Well done, he said. Naruto flushed pink. There's a couple of visitors here to see you, too. Minato stepped aside, allowing 2 others to approach. Wah wah. Naruto gasped at the familiar sight of the woman with long, blonde hair in pigtails, and the white-haired man in sandals who accompanied her. Grandma Tsunade. Pervy sage. Hey now, Jiraiya chided, that's no way to address your beloved godfather. I came all this way to see you on your big day, you know. Naruto laughed as the stocky man patted him on the back. Tsunade stepped forward when Jiraiya withdrew and planted a kiss on Naruto's forehead. He shrank back, smiling nervously due to the many spectators' comments. Not in front of all these people, Granny, Naruto said, holding up his hands. Ignoring him, she smiled and took a step back. We're both very proud of you, Naruto. Keep on following your path. You know I will, believe it. Naruto said, pumping a fist. Everyone laughed at his display of confidence, but then Kushina paused and looked around. Where's Sasuke? She asked. Naruto nodded toward the exit. He's still in there. I was called before him. Several minutes later, Sasuke made his appearance. He held up a freshly gifted headband to show he'd passed, and was showered with the same surprise affection from the welcoming party. Naruto took the opportunity to break away and congratulate Sakura. She didn't speak more than a few words, but her eyes shimmered with awe the whole time. The girls around her made comments under their breaths, watching as one of the 2 most renowned students paid Sakura a personal visit. Until now, he'd always tried to limit himself to the occasional passing hello, but Naruto wanted to show his appreciation for Sakura on such an important day. Naruto, come on, Sasuke beckoned, walking over to him. We're going to Ichiraku to celebrate. We are. No kidding, Naruto said, his attention captured by the news. Sasuke nodded. He made eye contact with Sakura and offered her a subdued, congratulations. Just as she had with Naruto, Sakura remained silent for the most part, and was only able to utter a soft, thank you, Sasuke. Heck yeah, Naruto shouted at the sky. That's what I call a celebration. He heard a thud, turned back, and noticed Sakura was no longer standing behind him. She had fallen unconscious, her long hair fanned out around her. Oh no, Sakura, Sakura, are you alright? Naruto knelt at her side, freaking out as a crowd formed around the pink-haired girl. Sakura, Sakura, wake up. This day was wild. First he aced a super easy graduation exam, and now he was getting a trip to Ichiraku, but couldn't hightail it there because his crush passed out. He hoped that at some point, things would calm down. Tsunade strode onto the scene and took on the task of reviving Sakura. Everyone cleared the way for her, but even with a wider gap at its center, the crowd of onlookers grew. When Naruto was sure Tsunade had the situation under control, he stood back and observed his surroundings. A single individual stood a noticeable distance away from the huge crowd. The person's shoulder-length white hair and green vest disappeared around a corner. Alarms raised in Naruto's head. That had to have been Mizuki-sensei, but why was he in such a rush to leave? Sasuke, Naruto said, come here. What's going on? Sasuke asked, leaning closer. Naruto whispered into his ear, received his brother's nod of approval, and took off after Mizuki while everyone was distracted. Sasuke would let Dad know what was up. Now all he needed to focus on was finding out why the leaf instructor snuck off like that. Mizuki smirked as he leapt from tree branch to tree branch, making his way to the fourth Hokage's residence. The sky was almost dark by the time he stopped at the largest tree near the house. He crouched and formed a hand sign, checking the premises for any inhabitants. None were detected. Hey, this was easier than I expected. Now I'll just grab the scroll while everyone's at the academy. Mizuki dashed from the edge of the forest to the side of the house, pressing his back against the wall. He peeked around the corner just in case, pleased to find there was nobody in sight. No nearby chakra signatures either. He slinked along the wall and amassed chakra in the soles of his feet. Leaping off of the ground, he rose several feet into the air and grabbed onto the railing outside of the front door. Mizuki flipped over the side of the railing and planted his feet, bypassing the stairs in one smooth motion. The front door was made from high-quality wood, and a leaf village symbol was carved into its center. No surprise, only the best for the residents of the Hokage. Unseen to the eye were a series of interlinked seals embedded into the polished wood. One parent seal triggered the rest, as far as Mizuki could tell from a distance. If he dared to try and break in without disarming the initial trigger point, he wouldn't like the result. Release, Mizuki said under his breath, forming the hand sign necessary to disengage the barrier. He couldn't help but laugh. Ironically, he had Lady Kushina's guidance to thank for his success. He'd paid more attention than anyone else during her sealing jutsu classes, and taken the lessons even further while studying on his own. An intangible sense of something unraveling within the lattice of chakra that protected the Hokage's home earned a wry smile from Mizuki. I did it. Now I can just walk right in. Wherever Mizuki was going, he wasn't wasting any time getting there. Naruto could have matched his speed with no issue, since it paled in comparison to the speed drills his dad put him and Sasuke through. Instead he hung back, careful with his footing to avoid giving himself away. In all honesty, Mizuki was so hyper-focused, Naruto doubted he would have noticed any suspicious sounds anyway. Some time later, Mizuki slowed down a bit. Naruto let the gap between them widen in case the Chunin was about to stop. He was correct. Mizuki landed on a branch of the tree nearest to Naruto's house and stared at the residence from afar. Then he hopped down onto the grass, formed a quick sign, and snuck across the stretch of land leading to the house. He must have been double-checking that he wasn't followed with that last jutsu. Whatever the academy teacher was up to, there was no chance in hell that it explained away breaking into Naruto's house while no one was around. He had to be crazy to think he'd get away with this. Boy, Naruto said to himself with a snicker, have I got a surprise for you. He observed as Mizuki deactivated the seal from outside and let himself in. When he was certain enough time had passed for the intruder to let down his guard, Naruto took action. He brought his hands together, weaving a short series of signs from memory and activating the house's network of security seals. Mom would be so proud of what he had planned. A blend of unusual sounds emanated from his house. He proceeded toward the scene of the beautiful disaster with a playful smile on his face. Taking a tentative step forward, Mizuki reached for the door handle. He touched it and flinched, relaxing when no alarms sounded and he wasn't blown to Kingdom Come. Sighing, he kicked himself for being scared. Why should he be? Most of the Anbu detail was either on missions or overseeing the graduation proceedings, so no one would show up to stop him. The scroll of sealing was ripe for the taking, it was as good as his. Stupid, he chastised himself, shaking his wrists as he drummed up the courage to follow through with the plan. His clammy hands were a testament to the dread creeping like a trickling bead of water down his spine. He'd planned this out long ago. He couldn't chicken out now, after all of that preparation. What would the point of any of it be if he did? On the other hand, once he did this, he'd be branded a criminal and a rogue ninja. Sure, perhaps he could make it beyond the village border before anyone was the wiser, but who was to say Anbu scouts, or whatever Jonin Team Minato sent to apprehend him, wouldn't catch up before he could disappear into the safety of anonymity in another land? He shrugged. There was no way to know. Mizuki was so close, to having his hands on that thing. All he needed to do was pick the lock on the door and take his rightful prize for himself. Keeping this in mind, he steeled his resolve and got to work. Less than a minute later, a satisfying click came from the hidden mechanism in the door. Mizuki had to stop himself from cheering with excitement. He tapped the door and it swung wide, bumping against an adjacent wall. Here goes nothing. Mizuki took a ginger step forward into the house, giving it a quick sweep with his eyes and feeling the space out for any unusual chakra sources. The scroll wasn't in the main room of the house, much less laying out in the open for him to find. That was to be expected. He chose another room, peeked around the corner despite being sure he was alone, and entered. Again, no luck. The fourth try was the charm. As he had in the previous locations, Mizuki performed a jutsu to feel for the scroll's chakra. This time, he found something unusual hidden behind a false panel in the wall of what seemed to be Minato and Kushina's bedroom. He slid back the panel, pulled the scroll free, and felt along its seam. While on the surface, it appeared to be simple to open, an invisible sealing jutsu prevented him from accessing the contents. Mizuki molded chakra in preparation to undo the seal, but made it no further. Without any warning, the dull hum of the home's intruder detection jutsu reached his ears. Fear struck him like a gut punch. He made a beeline for the exit with the spoils of his mission under one arm, but it was no use. When he reached the front door, a current of lightning chakra rippled in the air and struck Mizuki, rooting him to the spot in front of the entrance as his body spasmed. The scroll fell and rolled away. He cried out, unable to do a thing beyond fight to stay conscious. His teeth ground against one another with considerable force. He bit his tongue so hard, not even a grown man could shrug the pulsing pain off. The agony of Mizuki's predicament was unimaginable, made all the more unpleasant by a sudden wave of water crashing down onto him to amplify the shock. Where this water came from was anyone's guess. Then, as if all of the previous torment wasn't enough, stone spikes protruded from the carpet beneath his feet and pinned him in place. The only responsive part of his body was his eyes. He willed himself to look around the room for any sign of the Hokage or his guards. He saw neither. Instead, he took in the smug expression on the face of one Naruto Uzumaki. The boy stood at the threshold of the front door, smirking like a classroom prankster at the pathetic sight in front of him. His bright orange jumpsuit and blonde head of hair were the last things Mizuki saw. Katya, Mizuki-sensei. I rigged the seal to go off in reverse, and target anyone inside the house, after you walked in. The boy's cheeky victory taunt stung. A 12-year-old caught him. Powerless to do anything else, Mizuki cursed the damn brat with all of the energy left in him before passing out. The following morning, Mizuki's arrest, made possible by the Hokage's son, was the topic at the forefront of everyone's minds. The village was shocked that a traitor had lived among them all of this time, harboring malicious thoughts behind a deceptive smile. The Chunin instructor had years of history with the village, built a life and reputation here, and had thrown it all away in one instant for a power grab that failed. His entire life was eclipsed by a shameful legacy of betrayal. The opposite was true for Naruto. He strolled along the central path through the Hidden Leaf village with Sasuke, smiling and waving to the frequent praisers of his good deed the prior night. A handful of kids came up to him asking for details about his awesome takedown of the Chunin-level rogue ninja. Rather than tell the lame tale of their home security measures handling the threat, Naruto allowed himself to spice the details up a little, invoking endless eye-rolling from his brother. Yeah, I totally clocked him good. Naruto lied. He begged me to let him go, but you know, I've got a village to defend. Believe it. This seemed to satisfy the first batch of inquisitive citizens, adult and child alike. Soon, he was retelling the encounter again. Ah, it was nothin'. I let him know the Anbu were on their way and he fessed right up. Told me his plan to steal the scroll of sealing from Dad and everything. Wow, big brother Naruto, said the pint-sized boy staring up at him in awe. You're so cool. Thanks, Naruto said, smiling down at Konohamaru Sarutobi, the third Hokage's grandson. His friends, a girl with long brown hair parted down the middle named Moegi, and Udon, a boy with a messy trail of snot dripping down his nose, echoed Konohamaru's sentiments. Of course, Naruto accepted the compliments his mini fan club threw at him. Sasuke clicked his tongue as the children left. Naruto frowned in confusion, his hands behind his back while they walked in step with one another. What's up? He asked. You're just so sometimes, Sasuke said with a shake of his head. What? It's not like I didn't nab him. Still, no need to act like such a big shot. Plus, you may not have noticed, but you keep changing your story. Anyone could tell you're embellishing. Naruto's face turned a deep red. He raised a fist. Whatever. You're just mad because I was the one who took him down. Isn't that right? Hey, give me a break. Can't you just be happy for me? Geez. Idiot, it's not that I'm not happy for you, Sasuke was quick to correct, it's just, yeah, we're the Hokage's sons, but we aren't untouchable. Minato isn't either. Naruto poked out his lip. HMPH. Speak for yourself. Damn that Sasuke. Always such a downer. So what if Naruto was still riding the high of his recent triumph, or the 3-bowl free ramen binge he'd indulged in at Ichiraku after graduation? He could afford to feel special. They both could. They'd earned it, right? Naruto splayed one of his palms and looked down at it, smiling as he recalled the single piece of the puzzle he'd kept from everyone. The moment when, on a whim, he directed a shadow clone to return a transformed copy of the scroll and kept the original for himself. He wanted to see what was so precious inside of the darn thing, and boy, had he seen. He replaced the seal and put it back by morning, of course, but the new jutsu he learned was gonna blow everyone's minds, including Sasuke's. He couldn't wait to show it off. A faint rumble caught his attention. Sasuke glanced in the direction of the disturbance, too, getting into a battle stance. What's that? Naruto asked, scratching his head. How should I know? No sooner had Sasuke given this remark than 2 girls appeared in the distance, joined at the cheek and hip and fast approaching. One was Sakura in her usual hot pink kimono with white trim, and the other was the long-haired blonde, Ino Yamanaka, in a purple kimono. They sped down the path, leaving a billowing trail of dust in their wake. Sasuke yanked Naruto out of the way and backflipped to avoid the girls' advance. They continued to glare at each other, disappearing around a corner. Nearby witnesses whispered and watched as the tornado of rivalry tore a clean path to Sakura and Ino's destination. Naruto got to his feet and dusted off his clothes. What's up with them? They're probably racing to the academy for team selections. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. You know, where we'd be if you didn't waste all of our time boasting to bystanders. Ah, shut up. Just hurry up already. They picked up the pace. Naruto could see the roof of the academy in the distance. He shivered from head to toe with excitement. Today, he'd be placed on a team. Iruka-sensei finished calling out team assignments and waited as his former students processed the news. Naruto's stomach dropped at the realization that he wouldn't get to do missions alongside Hinata after all. At the very least, he would have time to get closer to Sakura. He already worked well with Sasuke, so that was no issue. Brushing off his mild disappointment, Naruto raised a fist. Go Team 7, believe it. Sakura was slower to raise her hand, but she joined him, and so did Sasuke, with much less emotion than either of his teammates. Naruto turned to Sasuke. Behind him, Ino made a remark that sounded negative, and he could hear Sakura chuckling to herself. Those two were always at each other's throats. Sasuke, Naruto said, you ready to meet our sensei? Sasuke was resting his head on steepled fingers. He turned to acknowledge the question with a plain expression. I'm ready to go. Naruto was more than ready as well, so he was beyond displeased at Iruka's news that their sensei would meet with them in half an hour. Making matters worse, they had to stay in the classroom the whole time. Naruto shifted around in his seat as he fought to repress his mounting impatience. One after another, the other teams descended to the bottom floor of the lecture hall and left with their appointed sensei. When it was her group's turn to go, Hinata stopped and waved goodbye to Naruto, giving him a sad smile. He tried to distract himself as she left by striking up a conversation. I wonder what kind of guy our sensei is. Naruto looked up at the ceiling and let his imagination run wild. Do you think he's someone really strong and cool? Or maybe a big, brood-wise guy? Who knows? Sakura said. She ran a hand through her long hair, leaving Naruto mesmerized by its silky appearance, and sighed. I just hope he shows up on time. That's the least he could do. Agreed, Sasuke said. Sakura flushed pink. Hey Sasuke, Naruto, I'm really glad we're all on a team together. Sasuke nodded. Yeah, me too. Naruto smiled back, trying to ignore the butterflies in his stomach. Maybe we could go out for lunch together later. He froze, realizing his blunder. I mean, all of us, as a team, you know. Sakura gave him a polite smile, her voice wavering a little as she said, that would be nice, Naruto. Several more minutes of mind-numbing silence later, they moved to the bottom row of seats. However useless this small act was, it allowed them to pretend they'd cut down on the wait time by sitting closer to the door. At last, even Sasuke couldn't take it anymore and spoke up. Seriously, come on, he said. Where is he? The other teams are all gone and he's still keeping us waiting. I bet he was out on some super secret awesome mission, and he's on his way here as we speak. Naruto suggested. He pointed to the sliding door they'd spent the better part of 45 minutes staring at, his face stuck in a perpetual open-mouthed smile. Nothing happened. He turned to his teammates with a sheepish grin. Seriously, he couldn't have forgotten about us or anything. Right. I highly doubt it, Sakura said. After all, Naruto, you're the Hokage's son, and Sasuke's the last Uchiha. There's no way our sensei forgot he was assigned to this team. Good point, Sasuke muttered, scanning the room. Then what could be keeping him? Naruto launched into a feeble attempt to salvage Sakura's self-image, realizing she'd indirectly downplayed her own importance on Team 7. She was amazing, after all. Smart, and pretty, and he must have looked like an idiot stuttering through sentences like he'd never spoken a word in his life. It would be a miracle if any of his excited gibberish was understood, let alone managed to boost Sakura's confidence. In the middle of Naruto's rambling, Sasuke nodded toward the door. The children ceased their chatter and honed in on the man who'd just entered the classroom. He had a slim build, a head of spiky silver hair, and wore a black mask that covered the bottom half of his face. Hello, you three, the man said, hands in his pockets. He spoke in an even tone with a bit of a lazy drawl. My name is Kakashi. Kakashi's mask's movement was the only indication that the words they heard came from him. Naruto gasped. He squinted at his sensei and wasn't all that surprised to notice Sasuke scrutinizing him, too. I know you, the boys said in unison. They shared an awkward glance. The vague memory of this man visiting their home a couple of times in the past was all Naruto knew of this man. He appeared to have been very close with their parents, judging by his casual demeanor and how they welcomed him inside. Seeing that Sasuke remembered him was a relief, and helped make Naruto more sure he wasn't making this all up. Ah, that's right, Kakashi said. I believe we did meet before this. I didn't stick around for long, though. Anyway, nice to more formally meet you, Naruto, Sasuke. Minato was my sensei back when I was your age. He turned to Sakura. And you must be Sakura Haruno, correct? She stood up, flustered, and gave a polite bow. Yes, Kakashi-sensei. A pleasure. Why were you late? Sasuke asked, cutting straight to the point. Kakashi rubbed the back of his head, delivering what Naruto guessed was a nervous smile. It was hard to say for sure because of the mask. Ah, right. Sorry about that. I fell into a puddle on the way here and had to go change. The three of them looked at him with deep skepticism. He flinched. Laughing it off, he said, "Well, why don't we get going?" "This guy's a Jonin," Sasuke whispered. "No kidding," Sakura said, arms crossed. "I'm not convinced." Already past the point of debating this, Naruto hurried out of the classroom when Kakashi beckoned them to follow him to the rooftop. The area retained its usual cozy vibe. The flooring was two-tiered, separated by steps leading to a narrow lower level. Kakashi rested on a rail of precarious structural integrity that wrapped around the entire rooftop, giving it a closed-off feeling. Rows of tall trees dotted the upper level. Naruto plopped down on the highest step between Sasuke and Sakura with a smile. "So," he said, adjusting his headband for the billionth time just for the rush of knowing it was there, "are we gonna do some awesome ninja training now?" "Not so fast there, Naruto," Kakashi cautioned, wagging a finger. "Let's see. First off, let me have you guys introduce yourselves." "Well, I guess you already have, but give me more detail than just your names." "Introduce ourselves." Sakura placed a finger on her chin, gazing up at the hazy clouds. "What should we say? Your likes, dislikes, your future dreams and hobbies." Kakashi made a wide gesture. "Things like that. I'll go first." Naruto piped up. "Of course you will," Sasuke said with an amused roll of his eyes. "My name's Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm the son of the amazing Minato Namikaze, the Hokage. I'm the strongest one on this team, believe it." Sakura tried to interject. "Naruto, that wasn't one of the questio. I like instant ramen, but I like the ramen from Ichiraku even more. What I dislike is the 3 minutes after pouring hot water into instant ramen. My hobbies are eating ramen, comparing ramen, and hanging out with my best friend Hinata. And my future dream is to live up to my namesake as son of the 4th Hokage, and to one day surpass my dad." "Surpass Minato-sensei," Kakashi said, eyes uncharacteristically wide. "That's quite the goal." "You're always so ridiculous," Sasuke said. "Oh, and I also dream of making my big brother eat his words one day." Naruto directed a cutting glance at Sasuke, who smirked. "Okay," Kakashi said. "Next." His eyes fell on Sakura, who clammed up and curled her legs against her chest. I'm Sakura Haruno, sir, and she eyed Naruto and Sasuke, face drained of color. "What I like, who I like is." Her eyes flitted from one boy to the other, and she blushed. "And my hobby is," her eyes cut to them again, and she averted her gaze. She drew in a heavy breath. "My future dream is to." Sakura let out an excited squeal and said nothing more. "And," Kakashi prodded, "what about your dislikes?" "I dislike, well, I don't know. I've never really given it much thought. I guess you could say I dislike Ino from our class for being so bossy, and for being jealous that I'm on the coolest team, while she got saddled with the lamest one. I also dislike getting gum stuck in my hair." She feigned gagging. "It takes forever to get out, and I'm not really sure what else." "I see." Kakashi turned to Sasuke, not bothering to prompt him. "My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I'm this loudmouth's adoptive relative, and for whatever reason, I like him some of the time. I dislike a lot of things, including Naruto when he's grandstanding for attention." "Hey." The young Uchiha disregarded his brother's complaint. "My future dream is a complicated one, but it includes restoring my clan. I aspire to avenge my loved ones." "Wait," Naruto said, "what do you need to avenge us for?" "Not you guys, dummy." Sasuke stared at the floor. "I'm grateful for Lord Minato and Lady Kushina taking me in, but I can't just wait around. I have to get stronger if I'm going to make my goal a reality. And I will." Naruto examined Sasuke's cold stare, unsure what to say or do next. What was up with him all of a sudden? Did this have to do with whatever it was that he and Dad always kept secret? "Good." Kakashi clapped his hands together in finality. "You all have unique aspects about you, and I look forward to our first mission tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Naruto and Sakura said at the same time. That's right. You three have to complete one task first before I approve you as genin. Taking in Kakashi's words, Naruto gulped. Resisting the impulse to nag the man to spit it out left him squirming with excess energy. There was something new in the atmosphere. He could tell by their rigid postures that Sakura and Sasuke felt it too. Whatever this mysterious mission was, Naruto feared Kakashi might make it something cruel or impossible to complete. But as he thought back on his parents' undying confidence in him, the tension in his shoulders eased and his breathing slowed. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. Naruto slowly pulled open the screen door leading to his parents' room and peeked through. Dad, Minato was sitting cross-legged in the corner of the room. He exhaled and turned to face Naruto with a smile. Welcome home, son. I heard you were assigned to Kakashi's squad. Naruto nodded, directing a solemn stare at the floor. Minato raised an eyebrow. Is something the matter? Scratching the back of his head, Naruto said, yeah. I mean, not exactly. It's complicated. Are you busy right now? No. Minato waved dismissively. I was practicing my manipulation of nature chakra while your mother's out reinforcing the village barriers. Nothing urgent. Go on. Taking a moment to compose his thoughts, Naruto straightened up and said, it's about the scroll of sealing. I kind of didn't return it right away. I got a little ambitious. Before you get mad, I promise I didn't let it leave my sight. Naruto put his arms up in a defensive gesture and shut his eyes. I just wanted a peek. I put it back as soon as I was done. Minato rose from the floor and walked over to Naruto. When the latter realized he hadn't been scolded or struck, he cracked one eye open. Dad, he said, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. His father placed a hand on his shoulder. I already know, Naruto. Why you know? Yes, but I appreciate that you came to me about this. All of the pent-up anxiety that had been driving Naruto crazy until now left him. He fell to his knees. I was so scared. I thought you were gonna punish me. Well, Minato said with a rub of his chin, most parents might, but to be honest, I simply trust you too much to be worried. Naruto couldn't believe his ears. He stood up again, collecting himself. You trust me. Of course. Minato smiled. Last night, after I checked to see that the scroll was returned, I examined it. You did a great job recreating the seal. I couldn't tell it apart from the original at first. No surprise there. But I couldn't feel the chakra from my flying thunder god marking on the inside of the scroll. I knew then that it was a fake, and since Mizuki was being processed into jail by the Anbu, it didn't take much to put together who had the real scroll. Naruto frowned, the weight of his poor planning crashing down around him. I decided to let you keep it for the time being. I would have spoken up if you didn't return it after tonight. Naruto, I know that you understand the importance of that scroll to the village's safety, and I trusted you wouldn't misuse its contents. Besides, not only are you my son, but you're an Uzumaki. If knowing your mom has taught me anything, it's that your clan's chakra reserves are more than enough to handle high-caliber jutsu like the ones in the scroll. Wow. Naruto fought to slow his rapid breathing and looked up at his dad, eyes wet. Thank you, Dad. You seriously aren't mad? No, not this time, anyway. I didn't tell your mother either. Neither of us wants to deal with one of her explosive episodes right now, do we? Naruto grinned, relief coursing through him. Nope. One other thing, Naruto. I know you must have done more than just peek. I admit I'm a bit excited. Minato leaned in closer. What did you learn from the scroll? Letting out a nervous laugh, Naruto averted his eyes. Yeah, you got me. So ya see, I spent hours practicing this awesome jutsu. I can make hundreds of clones now. The multi-shadow clone jutsu, Impressive. I haven't seen that jutsu performed in years. To think that you would learn it, and at such a young age. A noise near the front of the house caused them to perk up, both studying the chakra of the one entering the front door. Mom's home, Naruto said. Well, we'd better go greet her. Please promise me you won't pull any more stunts like this, son. Naruto turned back to his father and gave him an impassioned salute. I won't. It's a promise. Believe it. Team 7, sans Kakashi, assembled on the Leaf training field at the crack of dawn per the previous day's instructions. Each of them toted a backpack and pouch filled with ninja tools. They stood in an awkward triangle facing one another, doing their best to fight off impending yawns and gritty eyes. Faint streams of light trickled through gaps in the trees and shrubs. The prevailing darkness cast long shadows across the training grounds. "Morning, Sakura," Naruto said. "Morning, Naruto," she muttered. "Morning, Sasuke." Sasuke nodded in acknowledgement and scanned the area. "Where's Kakashi?" "I don't see him," Sakura said. Naruto waved off their comments. "Don't worry. I'm sure he'll be here soon, believe it. He wouldn't leave us waiting around again, would he?" Sasuke scoffed. "You really have a lot of faith in him." "I'm not sure we should give him the benefit of the doubt," Sakura said, tapping a finger against folded arms. "One time's a coincidence, twice is a pattern." "I agree," a fourth voice said. The speaker leaned over Sakura's shoulder. "Who are we talking about?" "Naruto, Sasuke," and Sakura jumped away from the newly arrived Kakashi. They switched into battle-ready stances, all gripping kunai in one hand. Crying out in surprise, Naruto pointed an accusatory finger. "Kakashi-sensei, how'd you sneak up on us like that?" Kakashi chuckled. "I wanted to see how good your senses of awareness were even when you're not on the battlefield." He sighed, rising from a crouched position. "Unfortunately, the reaction time you've just demonstrated doesn't bode well for you if you want to pass this test." "Ah, for crying out loud." Naruto grumbled. "How were we supposed to know to expect that?" "We weren't. That's the point, idiot," Sasuke shot back, still focusing on Kakashi. "So, what's this test all about?" "Yeah," Sakura said, her voice cracking, "tell us, sensei." Kakashi's sinister laughter turned Naruto's stomach. He ground his teeth together, bracing for whatever was about to be revealed. The other's reactions only deepened his worry. Sakura's wobbling knees said it all, but to her credit, she stood her ground. Sweat traveled down the side of Sasuke's face. Unlike his teammates, he maintained a false air of stoicism. "What's so funny?" Sasuke demanded to know. The Jonin plucked a pair of bells from one of the pockets of his military vest and held them out at arm's length. His half-lidded eyes gave the impression of a mocking smile beneath his mask. Kakashi watched their expressions with a disturbing degree of pleasure before diving into a meticulous walkthrough of the mission guidelines. Minato gnawed at the edge of one of his nails, sitting in front of his latest stack of paperwork and speed-reading the pages. No matter how many letters he stamped or correspondences he delivered, he couldn't abate the unease that had lingered ever since Naruto and Sasuke left for the day. Today was their first day as genin. His confidence in them knew no bounds, but he would be lying if he said he wasn't concerned. Although Naruto and Sasuke were quite strong for their age, their personalities were often their downfalls. Sasuke's near-tunnel vision focus on getting stronger, and Naruto's insistence on proving himself superior, often clashed with one another. The mere thought of those boys doing the bell test exercise against Kakashi, of all people, was a dangerous prospect. Kakashi was once Minato's student, so he knew the man's no-nonsense teaching style better than anyone else. Kakashi wouldn't hesitate to drop them from the program if he saw fit. "Please take this seriously and work together," Minato pleaded with the boys in his mind. Shaking off his worries, he buried himself in more paperwork. A few minutes later, he laid his hand on the last wrapped scroll on his desk and watched it vanish from the room with a smile. "Off to the Guardian Shinobi 12 with you." He sensed the Flying Thunder God seal marker in the Guardians, location activate, confirming his message's arrival. No matter how many times he made these instant deliveries, they never got old. His improved version of the second Hokage's jutsu was more than a weapon for battle. It also made the more tedious aspects of his job insanely convenient. If he were honest, he might be getting a little lazy these days. Minato's eyes fell on a folded sheet of paper on the side of his desk that he'd almost forgotten. Not one for signature, but still important. He snatched it up and unfolded it, rereading the message within. Bitter memories resurfaced, bringing him back to a time he preferred not to revisit. The fourth Hokage loathed to venture further into the abandoned lab with Lord Hiruzen upon arrival. Its dismal conditions were less than pleasant to examine, but he knew they had a job to do. Bloodied tables, body parts strewn all over the place, and rows of shelves and dingy cabinets cleared of their contents painted a bleak picture of this place's intended use. Worst of all, there was no trace of the one responsible for it all, Mr. Orochimaru of the legendary Sannin. The look on the third's face said more than words, so Minato didn't press him. It was no secret in the village that Orochimaru was one of his most cherished students. The fourth laid a hand on his shoulder for support, although he knew it was a futile gesture. Traveling beyond the main room of the laboratory yielded similar findings. Minato darkly pondered how he was keeping his breakfast down in the face of the atrocities he beheld. Whether for better or worse, the Hokages and the Anbu detail accompanying them found no living test subjects among the bodies they recovered. Over the course of the day, they found 2 more hideouts where Orochimaru had carried out additional, even more gruesome acts. He hadn't been quick enough to evacuate these locations, so Minato and Hiruzen ordered the areas blocked off. They assigned an investigation unit to round up any survivors and see to it that they were treated by the medical ninja on standby. However, even among those who were well enough to converse after treatment, none of the test subjects provided any useful information regarding Orochimaru's whereabouts. No surprise there, Minato told himself. Orochimaru would have had the presence of mind to wipe their memories or place seals on them before making his exit. A squad of Anbu interrupted the Hokage's walkthrough of one of the hideouts with more news. Lords 3rd and 4th, the leader of the group said as she came to a stop in the doorway. She took a knee, and her comrades followed suit. Urgent news. Minato gestured toward her with as polite a smile as he could muster under the circumstances. Proceed, Yugao. The purple-haired woman raised her head to reveal an expression wrought with concern. A lump caught in Minato's throat. What else had gone wrong now? Several Anbu operatives have disappeared without a trace, sir. Their lockers are cleared out and there is no sign of them anywhere in the village. Without having conducted a more thorough search, we can't be sure, but it's believed they have defected. Hiruzen darted an eye toward Minato, but said nothing. It was clear they were both thinking the same thing. The former's suspicions surrounding Danzo's involvement were looking more and more credible. Yugao continued. Several of the supposed deserters are known to be former members of Danzo's root division. I've brought a running list. She held out a slip of paper, which Minato took with a reluctant sigh. He was relieved not to see one of the most valuable root operatives' name on the list. Codenamed Kino, then Tenzo, and at last renamed Yamato, the boy possessed a derivation of Hashirama Senju's legendary wood style. He obtained these powers as a result of experiments thought to be carried out by Orochimaru, but these rumors were never confirmed. Minato feared someone with the first Hokage's power falling into enemy hands almost as much as he did the jutsu in the scroll of sealing. Nodding toward Yugao, he dismissed her to resume the search and turned to Hiruzen. The elderly retiree pressed his fingers to his temples. He looked up with wet, tired eyes and a deep frown. It seems we have much to do, Minato. Yeah, much to do. Sadness struck Minato's heart as he relived that haunting day from years ago. He blinked and observed the note in front of him, pulling his focus back to the present. Lord 4th, I've made headway in tracking down Danzo and Orochimaru. I encountered one of Danzo's loyalists, a former comrade from Root. He wore the same attire as the enemy ninja from our first mission to track Danzo. I alerted the rest of the squad and we pursued the target, but he triggered a minefield of paper bombs, taking his own life before we could get any intel. I've provided a visual of the location, and will report back when we have more for you. Yamato. The visual consisted of the bottom portion of the paper, where Yamato had embossed an image outlined in ink. Minato whistled at the intricate level of detail. The imitation of depth, no doubt achieved with a stamp made from wood style, almost made him forget he was staring at a flat plane. Wow, the things that boy can pull off with his jutsu. In a matter of several years, Yamato had grown from a solitary soul unsure of his purpose into a devoted ally of the Leaf. His strength, both within and without, was commendable. Minato found comfort in knowing that wherever Danzo was holed up, he wasn't commanding a loyal soldier with wood release on top of having Shisui Uchiha's eye. He had Itachi to thank for the latter bit of intel. Minato sighed and rose from his desk, thinking it might be a good idea to get some fresh air while things were slow. He hadn't made it more than 2 steps around his desk when a leaf ninja nudged open the door, staggered through, and dropped yet another stack of papers on the desk for him to sign. These just came in from the academy, sir. So much for taking a walk around the village. Kakashi placed a timer on one of several wooden posts next to a cluster of bushes. All right, he said, it's set for 12 o'clock. He depressed the start button. Holding up the bells once again, he explained, today's assignment is to take these bells away from me by noon. Naruto eyed the shiny metal objects. This mission sounded too easy. What was the catch here? His stomach growled. He winced, trying to ignore the raging appetite born from Kakashi's specific instructions to skip breakfast. Shaking the bells once for emphasis, Kakashi continued, those who can't do it won't get lunch. A mixture of shock and fury boiled in Naruto. He narrowed his eyes at the sadist before him. His idea of a fair first mission was to starve them for hours, then somehow expect them to put up a decent challenge. The blonde glanced at Sasuke, who was silent while he listened to Kakashi's words. Sakura was whimpering as she clutched at her noisy stomach. Pointing toward one of the posts, Kakashi said, you'll be tied to that, and I'll eat my lunch before your very eyes. But hold on, Sakura interrupted, holding up 2 fingers. Why are there only 2 bells? Kakashi chuckled. There are only 2 so that at the very least, one of your names will have to go into the logs. That person will be disqualified for failing the mission, and will return to the academy. You've got to be kidding me. Naruto shouted. His teammates gasped and turned to him. I can't believe Dad really allows someone like this to be in charge of Genin. What kind of crazy test is this? Naruto, Sasuke stressed, let him finish first. He gave Naruto a look that said, yeah, I know. Although he was still annoyed, Naruto reluctantly shut up and waited for Kakashi to continue. When the instructions were conveyed, Naruto fought to hold back his annoyance with the mission guidelines. The whole thing was rigged. He knew that much. How could an academy graduate learn anything useful from this? Hey Naruto, Sasuke said, snapping him back to attention, eyes up. His brother was in a combat pose, which he copied. Naruto noticed Sakura doing the same out of the corner of his eye. All 3 of them shook with anticipation. The moment was almost here. They needed a plan of action, or they were going to be wiped out with ease. If Kakashi was anywhere near the level of his dad, Naruto knew the test would be no cakewalk. That was fine, though. While it may have been risky, he had a plan. One that would allow all 3 of them to pass if it worked. He whispered to his comrades, then smirked as Kakashi spoke up. Begin when I give the ready go signal. Naruto didn't know what he expected from the Jonin who claimed to have been trained by his father. He didn't know what he expected from the first mission that would secure his spot as a Leaf Genin. He didn't even know if his plan to take the bells from his sensei would really work. But there was no way in hell he could have ever prepared for the sight in front of him. Kakashi reached into a compartment of his uniform and pulled out an orange book. It appeared well used, but was kept in decent condition apart from its curled pages. He adopted a casual stance, flipped to a specific location, and began reading the damn thing in front of his students. They were about to start their first mission, engaging in a life-threatening battle with him, and he was reading a book. Wait, Naruto knew that book cover. It was his godfather's best-selling book called Make-Out Paradise. Kakashi-sensei thought reading something sleazy like that was more important than their mission. Sasuke appeared no less pleased by this. He and Naruto locked eyes, equally confused. Sensei. Sakura said. What are you doing? It should be fine if I read this, Kakashi muttered to himself. I was just getting to a good part. Sensei. Naruto interrupted, more aggressive in his tone than Sakura. Oh. Kakashi paused and looked up at him. He gave a quick thumbs up. You 3 can begin whenever you like. Are you serious? Naruto said, clenching his fists. What the hell? He's taunting us, Sasuke said. Unacceptable. Not even Minato had ever disrespected Naruto and Sasuke to this extent. It's not like he couldn't have if he wanted to, but it was more the principle of the thing. This Kakashi guy was really grating on Naruto's nerves. Who did he think he was, treating them this way? Naruto was the son of a hero. He was going to be the next Hokage, for crying out loud. I'll teach you to underestimate me, believe it. Naruto declared to the engrossed reader. His comment received no acknowledgement. Sasuke, come on. Yeah, let's do this, Sasuke said. Sakura gasped, flustered, then stammered out a quick, why yeah. I'm ready. Kakashi peered over his book, examining the three kids with a lazy eye. Whatever was going on in his head, it was clear by his unchanging posture that he didn't feel the least bit worried. Sasuke performed a quick series of hand signs and sucked in a breath. Upon seeing this, Kakashi's eye widened in a first-ever show of genuine surprise. Naruto smirked. Sasuke spewed a concentrated sphere of fire that rocketed toward Kakashi, raising away all grass in its path. Kakashi leapt out of the blast zone, covering his eyes as smoke filled the area. Naruto lost sight of Sasuke, but that didn't matter. He'd done his part to get the ball rolling on their plan. Now it was his turn to shine. Naruto, you're up, Sakura said from somewhere close. Having received his cue, Naruto rushed in through the cover Sasuke made for him. He reached into his ninja tool pouch and fished out a few shuriken. Then he jumped into the air, scanning for Kakashi as he exited the cloud of smoke. Descending from his evasion of the fireball, Kakashi came face to face with Naruto. The former still held his book in one hand. Gotcha, Naruto said. He flung a volley of shuriken at Kakashi. Reacting with almost mechanical efficiency, the Jonin used his free hand to retrieve a kunai and deflect the shuriken. He flipped backward to avoid the follow-up punch Naruto attempted, and landed unharmed on the ground among the scattered shuriken. He gasped when he turned to see Sasuke speed onto the scene and move in behind him. What? Kakashi gasped, turning just in time to react to his student's body flicker technique. Sasuke threw two well-aimed punches at Kakashi, who blocked one hand, then the other by using his book as a shield. They stood interlocked in a grapple until the Uchiha decided to kick off of the ground with a burst of chakra, using Kakashi's grip on his hands to steady himself. Sasuke launched into a backwards flip, bringing one heel crashing down toward his sensei's head. However, the Jonin was not fooled. Realizing the boy's intent, he flung Sasuke away before his attack could connect. Sasuke rolled out of the momentum of the throw in time to plant his feet against the side of a tree. The tree creaked under the pressure of his collision. Both spots where his feet met the bark formed shallow dents. Not missing a beat, Naruto charged in when his brother was sent flying, only to end up in a similar hold as the one Sasuke fell victim to in seconds. Despite being neutralized with ease, Naruto looked up at his sensei and grinned. The shuriken on the ground around Kakashi erupted into clouds of smoke. Clones of Naruto came rushing at him from all sides. Multiple shadow clone transformation. The Jonin trailed off. Kakashi spun around, swinging the original Naruto's body in an arc to knock aside the closest of the fakes. Then he tossed Naruto in the direction of Sakura, who was approaching from the treeline. Kakashi dodged and counterattacked as the clones continued to try to land hits on him until they were all dispelled. Don't get too comfortable, Sasuke announced from above. Another fireball came hurtling toward Kakashi, who put away his book just before impact. Sakura and Naruto disentangled themselves from each other and stood up, looking on in stunned silence. Sasuke landed several feet away from the smoky aftermath of the fireball and retreated to stand next to his teammates. His breath came in shallow huffs. Sasuke, you alright? Naruto said, touching him on the shoulder. Yeah, I just used a bit too much chakra making fireballs back to back. Sasuke grimaced. Don't worry about me. I can rest after we get those bells. They continued to wait and watch in silence until at last, the haze surrounding the impact site faded. Kakashi emerged unharmed, but without his book. He didn't look as casual anymore, which filled Naruto with pride. He may not have been able to land a hit on their sensei, but annoying him was at least worth something. You almost burned my only copy, Kakashi said in a gravely tone. I guess I'll have to get a little more serious now. Naruto and Sasuke nodded toward Sakura, who smiled as she tugged on a hidden wire trap. The wire triggered something unseen, and Kakashi looked in the direction of the sound. Without so much as flinching, he caught a kunai that came flying at him from within the forest, turning to Sakura with a dark chuckle. Not bad, Sakura, he said. You almost got me there. He threw the kunai away as a paper bomb tag on its hilt hissed to life. A large rock the kunai embedded itself in exploded, raining chunks of stone across the field. Go, Sakura, Naruto commanded, giving her a light tap on the back and injecting a burst of chakra into her. In an instant, she vanished and appeared next to Kakashi, who was still distracted by dodging pieces of the exploded rock. She stumbled toward him, lunging for the bells hanging from his waist. Sasuke threw a handful of kunai in different directions in concert with Sakura's surprise attack. A complex chain reaction of collisions caused the kunai to ricochet off of one another at precise angles. The final kunai aimed straight for Kakashi's book, which peeked out from one of his pockets. Naruto pumped a fist in excitement. Smart move, Sasuke. The original plan had involved going for Kakashi's legs so he would have to both sidestep the kunai and evade Sakura. Aiming for his precious book was even better. What would he do now? In one fluid motion, Kakashi grabbed Sakura's wrist as she was inches away from reaching the bells and turned so that she was in the path of Sasuke's kunai. Time slowed for Naruto as he watched what he was certain would be Sakura's serious injury or death. Instead, Kakashi jumped away from the path of the attack and gently placed Sakura on the grass. She crawled backwards on her hands, looking up at him in awe. What the? Naruto whispered. Sasuke grunted. He's so fast. Kakashi rose from his kneeling position, regarding the students with a blank stare. Are you three done yet? Naruto vigorously shook his head. Of course not. We're gonna get those bells. Your attempt was clever. I'll give you all that. You're certainly Minato's son, Naruto, Kakashi said. He gave the group another thumbs up. And you each played your roles well. However, Sakura returned to Naruto and Sasuke's side. What is it? She asked, a tremble in her voice. There's one key issue with how you went about this. Kakashi looked at them one by one. There wasn't enough teamwork. Naruto, Sasuke, you two did the majority of the legwork for this strategy, and in the end, your plan didn't account for what might happen if Sakura didn't get the bells from me. You left her in a dangerous position where in a real mission, she could have died. Naruto looked at the ground, and Sasuke clicked his tongue in annoyance. I understand, Sasuke said, bowing his head in acceptance. Sorry, Sakura, Naruto muttered. No, she said, really, you guys, it's fine. And Sakura, Kakashi said in an authoritative tone, causing her to flinch. Not only do you doubt your abilities, but you should work on your form. Thanks to Naruto's jutsu, you were in a perfect position to snatch the bells from me, even with my speed advantage. It was your balance and focus that were off, which allowed me to outmaneuver you. Sakura sank to her knees and let out a whine. Sensei, you're so blunt. Kakashi pointed to Naruto. I didn't know the three of you had Minato's flying thunder god jutsu going for you. That should have been your ace in the hole. So what now? Naruto asked, much tamer than usual, but still determined. Can we give it another shot, sensei? Yeah, Sasuke added, peering at the clock. It isn't noon yet. I guess you could, but if I'm being honest, I wasn't really trying my hardest. The main goal was to see how well you kids worked together as a team when you thought only two of you would be allowed to become genin. Which brings me to the question, why did you still work together knowing that? Naruto gave a cheeky grin with his hands behind his head. Because, Kakashi-sensei, my plan was gonna eliminate that condition. Believe it. How? Kakashi asked, all pretense gone. I'm genuinely curious. Sasuke answered for him. He was going to have Sakura give him the bells and then make a shadow clone so each of us could have one. Well, Kakashi said, rubbing his chin, that's certainly a creative solution, if nothing else. I wouldn't have counted it, but I give you credit for thinking outside of the box. He sighed. Anyway, I'm pleased with your overall attempt, so you pass. Naruto was about to shout in excitement, but Kakashi raised a finger. In the future, remember this. Teamwork is key. On the battlefield, you and your comrades will only have each other to rely on. There won't be any workaround, like Naruto's idea to clone the bells. Everyone on the team is an important piece of the puzzle. Keeping this basic rule in mind could save your lives. Got it, sensei, Sakura said with a smile. Same, Sasuke answered with little fanfare. Naruto could tell by the drumming of his fingers against his leg that he was fighting back a show of excitement, but decided not to call him out. Alright, Naruto nodded. I don't remember most of that other stuff you said, but I think I got the gist of it. I'm awesome, my plan was awesome, and teamwork is important. Interesting how you got that out of my lesson, Naruto, Kakashi said with narrowed eyes. He shook his head. Good work today, you guys. You're all dismissed. We'll meet with the Hokage tomorrow morning for our first real mission. Take the day to rest and reflect. Finally, Sakura slouched, expelling a breath. Lunch. Let's hope you actually show up this time. Naruto shouted, his frantic waving unseen as their sensei walked away. The Jonin strode out of the training grounds, hands in his pockets. Naruto lowered his outstretched arms with a grudging half-smile. No matter how questionable the man's methods were, he had to admit his new sensei was pretty cool. Sasuke reached for his backpack in the pile they'd put their belongings in. Wait, Sasuke. Sakura gave Sasuke a meek wave. He froze, hand outstretched toward the strap of his bag. Well, you see, Sakura stammered, turning from one boy to the other as she spoke, I was thinking we could all stay and eat lunch here. You know, together as a team. She ran a hand through her hair, cracking a weak smile that sent Naruto's heart aflutter. I think that's a great idea, Sakura. Naruto beamed, hands on his hips. Whata ya think, Sasuke? Sasuke sighed. Well, no harm in it, I guess. He cut his eyes at Naruto. By the way, don't switch any of your rice balls out with mine again. You know I don't like sweets. Sakura raised an eyebrow at Naruto, whose nervous laugh gave him away. I only did it a couple of times, as a joke, he tried to rationalize. The tension of the moment broke when he moved to pick up his bag as a way of changing the subject. Minutes later, Team 7 sat on the grass by the wooden posts, their lunchboxes in their laps. They said thanks for the food before devouring their lunches in silence. Naruto was thankful to have Sasuke on his team. Foods best eaten hot, like the soup he'd brought, were child's play for his brother's fire style. Sakura watched in admiration as Sasuke conjured a weak flame, aimed it at the broth for a few seconds, then turned back to his meal. Naruto tried to eat in what he hoped was a refined enough manner that Sakura wouldn't see him in a bad light. He poised his chopsticks, for once in his life not feeling averse to the proper etiquette his parents used to emphasize when he was younger. They didn't want him scarfing down plates of food during meetings with higher-ups and their families. Granted, his mother admitted she was no saint in that respect either in her youth. Balancing a red bean from his soup with care, Naruto brought it to his mouth and swallowed. He peeked over at Sakura, who he was happy to see was more interested in her food than in his attempt at appearing cultured. Sasuke ate quietly, not looking at either of them while he cleaned his tray. Deciding to break the ice, Naruto spoke up. So, Sakura, he said with an air of false confidence, now that we're genin, what are you planning to do next? Sakura looked at him in surprise and shrugged. She slurped down a few bean sprouts dangling from her mouth, somehow maintaining her usual beauty and grace. Oh, I don't know. I was thinking I'd sort of figure it out as I go along. We have our first mission tomorrow, so I'm sure Kakashi-sensei will tell us more then. Sasuke wiped his mouth after biting into a rice ball. We'll probably get a lower-ranked mission to start with. A lower-ranked mission? The Uchiha nodded. Maybe AD rank. Naruto scoffed. Ha, like Dad would really assign us AD rank mission. We're the sons of the Hokage, and Sakura is the smartest girl in our class. There's no way that'll happen. Believe it. Whatever you say. Sasuke rolled his eyes and continued to eat. What do you mean we're getting AD rank mission? Naruto boomed, his voice carrying into the hall outside of the mission assignment office. Sakura and Sasuke slapped hands against their faces in embarrassment, and Kakashi eyed Naruto with quiet disapproval. I mean exactly that, Naruto, Minato said from his seat behind a long table. You're a new team, so like all new teams, you're expected to complete missions appropriate for your rank and work your way up. His guards, Genma, Iwashi, and Rado, stood against the wall behind him. They exchanged nervous glances. No, 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 Naruto said, shaking his head. No can do. That's boring. We're strong enough for a real mission, Dad. Naruto, Minato replied, stone-faced, that's enough. The others in the room fell silent, apart from Naruto. Well then, he said, adding a careful pause, I would like to decline this mission. Please assign it to another team, Lord Hokage. He bowed his head, hoping the show of respect would save him a stern talking to in public. Sasuke groaned from somewhere to Naruto's right as he and Minato's gazes met. Every breath became a chore, but the determined genin didn't show fear. As the Hokage's son, he was no coward. At long last, his father broke eye contact and adjusted the collar of his coat. Very well, Minato said with finality. You want a more active mission, huh? Of course I do, Naruto said. He punched the air in front of him. I know just the one. Minato rifled through a set of scrolls on the table, selected one from the stack, and applied a large stamp to its center. Then he repeated the process on a second scroll. He leaned aside to whisper in Genma's ear. Nodding in acknowledgement, the guard vanished from the room with body flicker. A blur sped past Naruto. He sensed Genma exiting the room and heading toward the main entrance. Meanwhile, his father rolled up the scroll he'd chosen with an unsettling smile. Naruto squirmed. That look was never a good sign. Team 7 spread out around the edge of the forest. They waited for Kakashi's signal with bated breath. Kakashi adjusted his earpiece, sending brief static through the channel. Everyone in position. Naruto nodded, even though no one could see it due to his hiding behind a tree. He made sure to keep his voice low. Naruto here, ready at point A. Believe it. Sasuke in position at point B. Sakura here, at point C. Good, Kakashi said, eyes on the target. Amid his teammates' affirmative replies, Naruto cut in. Sensei, I can catch it from here, no problem. The shaggy brown fur of the runaway cat Tora was impossible to miss against such lush green surroundings. The wild-eyed pet appeared unaware of his pursuers, and had settled onto the grass for a quick rest. Naruto pinged with impatience. This mission was a silly waste of their abilities, but Dad had promised to let him complete a much more active mission if he complied. So here he was, using his ninja skills to nab a pet that, from what he could tell, didn't even want to be found. Well, alright, Kakashi said after some quiet deliberation. You get one shot, though. If you fail, we do this the old FA. Done. Done. The Jonin sputtered. Yup. Naruto gripped the cat by the wrists to prevent escape, careful to dodge its dangling feet as they kicked and clawed at the air. Now, can we head back and get our payment? Dad said he had a better mission waiting for us after this. One of Tora's sharp nails grazed his cheek, causing him to cry out. Wow. Great work, Naruto, Kakashi said, his voice distorted by static. Careful with our target. Let's head back, everyone. Minato blinked, observing Tora's frantic attempts to escape the grip of the daimyo of the Land of Fire's wife, Madame Shijimi. She was a heavy-set brunette woman with, in Naruto's opinion, an unnecessary amount of makeup, lipstick, and eyeshadow. Her extravagance didn't stop there. The lady also sported hot pink nails and a colorful set of rings on each finger. Tears ran down her face in messy trails, smudging her multiple layers of cosmetics. She squeezed Tora tighter than Naruto thought was comfortable or safe, showering the cat with exclamations of joy. Madame Shijimi looked at Kakashi, her smile wide as she thanked his team for retrieving her pet. Iruka-sensei sat behind the table with Minato alongside several of his personal aides. They were all speechless, the awkwardness of the moment reflected in each of their faces. Naruto noted that his teammates appeared just as uncomfortable as he was, if not more. Sakura was tapping her foot, a prominent vein in her forehead betraying her waning patience. Sasuke didn't so much as look in their client's direction. For his usual tell whenever he didn't want to be somewhere, he maintained a thin-lipped frown. Naruto groaned, turning his attention back to the daimyo's wife. Poor thing. I'd want to run away, too. So, Dad, Naruto said as Madame Shijimi finished paying them and hurried out of the room, are you gonna tell us what this cool mission you have for us is now? Minato straightened a stack of papers and set it aside, smiling at his son from behind the long table. Of course. Team Kakashi, great job on your first mission. This next assignment will be your first one taking place outside of the village. The three genin gasped in sync with one another. Really? Naruto said, his mouth hanging open. That's awesome. He threw his arms into the air. The echo of his shouted words traveled down the hall. Kakashi shot him a stern glance. Listen up, everyone. Minato nodded. Thank you, Kakashi. He leaned back in his seat and beckoned one of his two nearby guards. Iwashi, tell Genma he can bring the client in now. The man nodded and flickered out of sight. Iruka slid a hand down his face, a pleading look in his eyes. A pang of guilt hit Naruto, and he did his best to stay quiet while the debriefing took place. Upon hearing the mission details and meeting the client, an old drunk guy named Tazuna, Naruto shriveled up in disappointment. The story was that Tazuna needed bodyguards on his way back to the Land of Waves, his home village. That was their mission, really. Bodyguards was probably just in the mission title to make an uneventful escort assignment sound interesting. Tazuna caught him staring in his direction and responded with an equal measure of attitude. His unfocused eyes came to life and honed in on Naruto with a corrosive glare. An overhead light reflected off of the man's silver-rimmed glasses. These kids are gonna escort me, Tazuna said with a huff. I didn't expect the Leaf to assign me a squad of mere children. He paused, raised an open bottle of sake to his lips, and took a gulp. Some of it dribbled down the side of his face. Isn't there anyone else? I assure you, this team is more than capable of bringing you safely back home, Minato said, turning to Kakashi. My former student, the famed Kakashi Hatake of the Sharingan, is going to be leading this squad. I wouldn't worry. Yeah, Naruto said, drawing the others' attention, and we were all in the top spots in our class at the academy, so don't you dare doubt us. Tazuna's unimpressed frown deepened. Naruto, Kakashi seethed over his shoulder, holding one arm out in front of him. Naruto grumbled to himself and stepped back. Kakashi gave Tazuna a two-fingered salute. We're ready to head out when you are. So, we're going to the Land of Waves. Sakura whispered while Kakashi and Minato held a quick discussion in private. There are no ninja there, right? That's what I remember the academy teaching us, Sasuke said. Crossing his arms, Naruto said, well, I'm not interested in some lame escort mission. I want a good fight to test my skills. Are you ever happy? Sasuke said with a disapproving snort. First you want a more challenging mission. Now we get it, and you're still complaining. But Sasuke, we've done so much training with Dad, and I really wanna see how far we've come. Sakura patted Naruto on the shoulder, giving him a sober smile. There will be plenty of time for that. We're going to be assigned all sorts of missions together, not just these kinds. There's no need to rush things. He flushed red and turned away at her touch. Thanks, Sakura, Naruto mumbled. Sorry, I'm just really excited, you know. Yeah, Sasuke said, his tone heavy with sarcasm, we do know. We know because you haven't stopped talking about it since our squad first formed. Naruto stuck out his tongue, but was distracted by the return of Kakashi-sensei, who ushered them toward the exit doors. In a few minutes, they would be on their way. Naruto buzzed with a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. Up until now, trips outside of the village had been rare for him and his brother, unless they were accompanying Dad at political meetings or watching the Chunin exams from the stands, which seldom happened. His mother once took him on a trip with her to visit the ruins of the Hidden Eddy village. She taught him about many key events and figures from times before their clan's tragic fall. All of that was great, but this was another matter altogether. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura were about to get a taste of what things were like in the land of waves. He could only imagine how different the lifestyle was there compared to here. Naruto stretched his arms and called out in triumph when they reached the other side of the giant green gate that signified leaving the village. Here goes. Our first away mission. Sakura, by contrast, was keeping her arms close against her sides. She walked past the threshold of the gate with noticeable stiffness, white-knuckling the handle of a kunai. Don't worry, Kakashi said with his back to the three genin. There are no major threats in C-rank missions like this one, so we should have nothing to be concerned about. Of course, Sensei, Sakura said, diverting her eyes in embarrassment. Yeah, Naruto said. We'll be fine, believe it. You'll see, Sakura. Sakura gave him a wavering smile and squared her shoulders. Thanks, Naruto. The four-leaf ninja lined up on either side of Tazuna and took their first steps toward the land of waves. Now was the time to put everything they learned into practice. Naruto's skin rippled. The hairs on his arms stood on end as they proceeded down the dirt path. He did his best to ignore the primal fear response. He couldn't show fear on a C-rank mission. He had not one, but two legacies to uphold. Nothing of note happened for some time. They continued on uninterrupted, stopping to check that the occasional rustling of bushes wasn't a sign of danger. Naruto felt around in his weapon pack for the two flying thunder god kunai he brought along, courtesy of his father. The local weapons shop was working on an order of a personalized set for him and his brother, but Minato provided a few of his with blank tags on the handles in the meantime. Even if this was just a simple escort mission, Naruto had it drilled into him from an early age that it was important to prepare for anything. They crossed a bridge over a section of land that had eroded away over time, creating a natural creek. Then they continued on, the peaceful splashing of the waves on the rocks lulling them into a sense of calm. Kakashi delivered a comprehensive breakdown of the distributions of power between nations and the critical role hired shinobi served for ninja-less villages like Tazuna's, prompted by an astute line of questioning from Sakura. When he finished the explanation, something about his posture shifted, his movements became less relaxed. The change was subtle, but it was there. He slowed a bit, looking over his shoulder. Naruto and Sasuke shared a glance and continued on. A few paces later, Naruto realized what was causing Kakashi-sensei's heightened alertness. The sun beat down across the cloudless sky, illuminating a single glistening puddle on the side of the road. They passed it without incident. On any other day, something so ordinary might be meaningless. There was one problem. Rain hadn't come for days. Doing his best not to make any obvious gestures, Naruto closed his eyes and concentrated chakra into his feet. Then he searched for unfamiliar chakra signals around him. He peeked at Sasuke, who was doing the same. Sakura appeared none the wiser, but still held a kunai at the ready. Not long after they psyched themselves up for battle, something unusual flashed across Naruto's mental radar. He turned around and watched with stunned intrigue as the puddle behind them wobbled to life. A shapeless mass of water rose from its surface and took the form of a man. His mist village headband reflected the sunlight, causing Naruto to raise a hand and shield his face. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the enemy wore a plain cloth uniform with spotted sleeves. One of these sleeves sported a bulky metal gauntlet and claws. Wasting no time, Naruto flung a special kunai in the direction of the stranger. The target ducked past the kunai and moved in for an attack. A second mist ninja with a matching gadget came leaping out of a cluster of bushes, launching himself overhead to block their retreat. A serrated metal chain followed the jumping ninja's trail and he landed on the other side of them with a snicker. One end of the chain was connected to each of the foes' gauntlets. The two men yanked on the chain with simultaneous grunts, pulling it taut around Kakashi and rendering him immobile. There was a sickening crunch. The squish of metal tearing through flesh and bone cut through the peaceful sounds of nature like a knife. Kakashi's body scattered, divided into messy chunks by the surprise assault. One down, said the filtered voices of the mist ninja in unison. Sakura staggered backward, letting out an involuntary shriek. Meanwhile, Naruto reminded himself to stay level-headed, searching for his sensei's chakra signature. There was no way he could have gone down so easily. No sooner had Naruto detected that Kakashi was unharmed somewhere nearby than the two foes approached from his blind spot. He spun around to meet them head-on. Naruto went in for a punch to both of their faces, careful to avoid getting tangled up in the blood-stained chain. Just like the overconfident dummies he was betting they would be, they raised their hands to block him. Second one down, they said as they looped one end of the chain around each of his wrists. They sprinted in opposite directions, taking his arms with them. Naruto was torn in half, vanishing in a puff of smoke. The mist ninja stared in bewilderment at the substitution log lying at their feet. They were not at all prepared when two Narutos grabbed them from behind, keeping the shoulders of their gauntlet-wielding arms locked in place. That's what you think, Naruto teased. Now, Sasuke. Sasuke had just left Tazuna in Sakura's care and hurried back to the battlefield when he heard Naruto's cue to jump in. A concentrated flame shot out of his mouth toward the attackers. The brothers formed signs with their free hands. A rumbling from below ground concerned Naruto. He trusted his gut and retreated with his clone. His choice may well have saved his life, he soon realized. A rush of water came sprouting up from underground, wiping out the clone and lifting his former captives into the sky. The wall of water buckled as Sasuke's fireball collided with it, producing a cloud of steam. Sakura observed the enemy ninja, who were working in concert in midair. One grabbed the other, spinning and flinging them toward Tazuna. The chain connecting them pulled taut as they careened toward the bridge builder, who took up a position behind Sakura. She gasped and raised her kunai in front of her, knees wobbling in fear. Watch out, Naruto shouted, pushing himself onto his feet and running as fast as he could. He and Sasuke dashed to intercept, but it was useless. They weren't going to make it, even with their speed. The brothers flung their custom kunai at the dirt in front of Sakura and Tazuna. Grab on, they ordered. The mist ninja formed drills out of water and thrust downward. Sakura and Tazuna noticed wires extending from Naruto and Sasuke's kunai, and reached out to touch the handles. The moment they did, they vanished, avoiding the water drills just in time. The enemies slammed into the ground, scarring the landscape with a vast crater. A fountain of water spewed from the crater and rubble descended like rain. A familiar sensation engulfed Naruto. He could only describe it as his body falling in multiple directions at once. Tazuna collapsed to the ground beside Naruto, the former landing on his back and looking around in bewilderment. Naruto grinned. He'd made it in time to teleport both of them to his other marked kunai. He pulled the bridge builder onto his feet with a relieved smile, then checked him for injuries. I'm alright, boy, Tazuna spat, swatting Naruto away. What the hell was that just now? No time to explain. Stay behind me. Naruto looked back to make sure Sasuke and Sakura were okay. Sakura was supporting Sasuke under one arm while he knelt and vomited into the dirt. Distracted by this at first, she redirected her attention to the ongoing battle. Kakashi had remained hidden during the fallout of the explosion, but now he stalked toward the two enemies in silence. If the chakra levels Naruto was sensing right now were anything to go by, Kakashi-sensei was planning something big. The mist ninja surfed on a wave of water flowing from the crater and headed straight for him, laughing maniacally with their claws at the ready. The Jonin adopted a wide stance, undaunted, and channeled chakra. In seconds, a dense mass of lightning grew in his hand. No bigger than his palm, it emitted a constant chirping sound. Anyone with the most basic ninja training would know it was bad news. Die! Cried the mist duo. They jumped a moment before impact, aiming to coil their chain around his neck. Kakashi severed the chain with a swift chop. The current of lightning energy traveled along the broken ends of the chain and hit both enemies. He leapt onto dry ground as the lightning surrounding his hand faded. The water flooding the crater was infused with electricity. Both mist ninja writhed and screamed, then fell limp, washing up near Team 7. Kakashi strode over to Tazuna. Whoa, that was awesome, Naruto said, his eyes wide with awe. Kakashi-sensei was so strong. Not as strong as his dad, but still. Well, Kakashi said, making a hand-washing motion, that takes care of that. Everyone okay? Yeah, Naruto said, his gaze moving to the fallen enemies. Thanks for the save, Kakashi-sensei. We're alright, Sakura chimed in from afar. She was still supporting Sasuke under one arm. He wiped his mouth with one of his no longer white armbands. What's the deal with Sasuke? Kakashi glanced over his shoulder. Naruto assured him there was nothing to worry about, but didn't go into detail about Sasuke's flying thunder god issue. No matter how fun teasing him was, now didn't seem like the time. Appearing satisfied with the non-answer, Team 7's sensei changed his entire demeanor. He directed a serious stare at Tazuna, who looked back at him with a resigned expression. Well, Tazuna, Kakashi said, looks like someone's got a lot of explaining to do. You did what? Naruto spat at Tazuna. His anger built like a steaming kettle. Sakura shook her head in silent judgment. Sasuke was still recovering from post-vomit fatigue, so he settled for a suspicious glare. Kakashi dropped the second of the freshly hogtied enemies next to a tree. I sensed these guys watching us a long time ago. Our mission brief didn't mention enemy ninja, so I wanted to see which of us they were after before I took them out. It seems they were targeting you, Tazuna. He retrained his gaze onto the bridge builder. But you already knew that. Tazuna grunted and avoided eye contact. Kakashi continued. If we'd known this information earlier, we could have assigned the mission to a squad of the appropriate skill level. We were only expecting to guard you against petty thieves and gang members, not trained assassins like the Demon Brothers of the Mist. Given what we know now, this mission is far too dangerous to be classified as AC rank. What's your deal? Naruto said, stomping over to Tazuna. He pointed a finger in his face, but got no reaction. Hey, I'm talking to you, Mr. Tazuna. You trying to get us killed? No, it's not that at all, Tazuna said in a low tone. He cast a somber frown up at the sky. You kids probably wouldn't understand, being from such a well-off, fortified place. He shivered, his eyes shutting tightly as if he were trying to block out a painful memory. Back home in my village, we don't have the guaranteed support of military forces to fall back on. We work for every scrap we manage to scrounge up, and even then life is a struggle. We don't have the kind of money needed to order a skilled detail of ninja. It's a drop in the bucket for wealthier lands like yours, but between the thugs terrorizing our people and the farmland that doesn't always yield enough product, paying a higher rate just isn't an option for us. He looked at the group with a defeated stare. Naruto froze. He'd never seen such utter hopelessness in someone's eyes before, and he found it hard to form words. The pure desperation on the bridge builder's face made blaming him for his actions feel wrong somehow, but with effort, Naruto shook it off. He looked back at Kakashi, who was quietly processing Tazuna's words. Okay, Naruto said, to be honest, yeah. You're right. I don't know what it's like to struggle to get by. I grew up in an amazing village, with plenty of resources and strong people I look up to. But that doesn't change a thing. You still tried to pull one over on us by saying this was just a standard escort mission. According to the rules, our mission should be terminated. The right thing to do would have been to be honest with my dad and see if he'd work something out. Kakashi nodded. Naruto's right. But honestly, I think we should all have a say in this. What do you two think? Once we pass into the land of waves, territory, it'll be treacherous. We may not be able to back out so easily at that point. So I'm leaving it up to you three. Sasuke's forehead crinkled as he weighed the pros and cons. Well, we're already part of the way there. I say we stick it out. Sakura looked from Sasuke to Naruto. I'm in if you two are. Sensei, you taught us that teamwork is one of the most important things for a squad of shinobi. Right. Kakashi smiled. Exactly, Sakura. Well said. And you, Naruto, are you up to the challenge? We may face some really dangerous enemies who are on a different level than these guys. He nodded toward the still unconscious demon brothers. I can't promise I'll be able to properly protect the three of you along with Tazuna at all times. Basic logic told Naruto that it was better to let another team pick up Tazuna's request. Maybe he could speak on the man's behalf to Minato about accepting the mission for a cheaper rate. Just this once, his father might allow an exception given the circumstances. Then again, Naruto asked for a more difficult mission to begin with, and now it had fallen into his lap. This must have been fate, he mused. Refusing to take this opportunity would be silly. Well, alright then, Naruto said. I vote we hang in there. I'm not about to back down from a challenge, believe it. He raised a fist and smiled. Let's do this. Cutting the moment short, he glared at Tazuna. No more secrets though, old man. Tazuna bowed his head, no longer giving off hostile or skeptical vibes. I promise. No more secrets. He pulled a half-empty bottle of sake out of his bag and took a swig. Also maybe lay off the alcohol, Kakashi said. You'll need your wits about you as we cross into enemy territory. Yeah, Naruto said. Geez, can't you stop chugging that stuff for even a second? You're worse than Grandma Tsunade. Grandma Tsunade. Tazuna echoed, mouth widening in surprise. As in Tsunade of the legendary Sannin. Yeah, Sasuke said. She's our godmother. Taking in the young Uchiha's words, Tazuna dropped his arms to his sides, nearly spilling his bottle. He blinked several times at Sasuke, who looked back with a plain expression. You're serious? Well, how about that? This guy was unbelievable. Most times, when Naruto met people from other villages, they treated him with respect. Some even feared him. His family's reputation preceded them, after all. Yet somehow, this sake-inhaling machine of a man had heard little of Naruto's family, or their connection to two of the legendary Sannin. Folks in the Land of Waves must have missed the memo, what with having no ninjas and all. Anyway, Kakashi said, I'll send word to the village to pick these guys up and then we can head out. He formed a few hand signs and touched the demon brothers' foreheads, placing them under what Naruto recognized from his studies as a paralysis jutsu. Naruto grinned. Don't worry about that, Kakashi-sensei. I'll take care of it. How are you going to manage that? Kakashi asked, scratching his head. When I punched them earlier, it wasn't about landing a hit. Naruto walked over to the men and held one of their palms open, revealing his flying thunder god mark at its center. See? Ah, Kakashi said. Pretty impressive. Even I didn't notice you pulled it off. Sasuke smirked. You're always working some angle, aren't you? Wow, Naruto, Sakura said with a broad smile, that's amazing. The team had very little daylight left, so they wasted no more time. Kakashi scribbled a note on a piece of paper, stuck it in one of the demon brothers' pockets, and gave Naruto the go-ahead. He sent them to his dad's kunai that he marked during training. The vague sensation of his diminished chakra reserves was little more than an itch, but it worried him. He had plenty of chakra to spare compared to most people, but even for him, each teleportation used a noticeable amount. Now that he was familiar with the jutsu, knowing that dad could use it so often without needing to recharge was mind-boggling. Was his father really just that strong? The group stayed their course, not speaking much until they made it to the shoreline. Tazuna in particular offered little in the way of conversation, other than informing everyone about the identity of the person who wanted him dead. He was a crime boss named Gato. When they reached the dock leading to the Land of Waves, it was dark out. Fog rolled in from across the water. A quaint wooden boat arrived under the cover of fog to pick them up. Team 7 waited for their client to board first, then climbed in after him. Naruto took note of the fact that the motor was off and the rower had traveled here by hand. The latter exchanged whispered words with Tazuna before taking off from the dock. He moved the boat back across the water with his passengers in tow, carrying them deeper into foreign territory. The thickening fog seemed to have a life of its own. The hazy beast crept closer and closer until at last, it swallowed their boat whole. An uncomfortable chill set in. Rhythmic splashes of water punctuated the uncomfortable silent journey, further cementing the reality that they'd officially departed from the Land of Fire. Sakura was the first to break up the monotony with a series of questions. Speaking just above a whisper, Kakashi provided a brief overview of differences in the culture of the Land of Waves versus the Land of Fire. While the impromptu lesson was interesting, Naruto couldn't help feeling distracted. His lips curled into an involuntary smile. Sure, they were headed somewhere dangerous, and that wasn't great news, but there was an upside. Naruto couldn't wait to measure his skills against real combatants, People who weren't having a friendly spar with him or pulling their punches because he was the Hokage's kid. It's not like he wanted to get beat up, but there was a small part of him that wondered how many of his victories were earned versus due to people holding back. Why are you grinning like that, idiot? Sasuke said, cutting his thoughts short. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Who knows? Maybe I was just thinking about taking out more bad guys than you when we face Gato's thugs. Sasuke scoffed and looked out over the water. In your dreams. His words lacked weight, giving the impression that although his body was here in the boat, his mind was elsewhere. Could Sasuke be worried? No. There was no way he'd let something like this shake him up. He was always so confident. Naruto put the silly thought out of his mind. Their boat ride stretched on for a mind-numbing amount of time. Naruto found himself struggling to stay awake more than once. A quick peek at the others reminded him of the seriousness of the situation. Kakashi-sensei scanned the area, doing his best to see through the boundless fog. Sakura was biting her nails, while Tazuna was curled up against the side of the boat, trying to make himself as small a target as he could. Everyone may have acted calm, but it was all a facade. The boat glided along, a mere speck next to the massive unfinished bridge spanning across a large swath of the ocean. It loomed over them, shrouded in fog like some ghastly monument. Naruto's mouth fell open. This was the unfinished version. Hey Mr. Tazuna, he said, startling everyone out of their inner thoughts. What's the reason you're building this bridge, anyway? Honestly, Tazuna sighed. That bridge is our lifeline. A small country like ours, that doesn't have ninja for protection, is bottlenecked in an isolated location. Gato, the man I told you about earlier, is using our isolation against us and controlling our flow of resources. He peeked over the rim of his glasses. All trade is internal and closely monitored by his gang of lowlifes, but this bridge would connect us with the rest of the world and promote economic growth. Gato doesn't want me to finish my work since it will allow our people to break free of his control. He'll stop at nothing to ensure my death, and he knows that because there are no trained warriors in our village, no one is going to challenge him. Not since. The old man broke off, grimacing at the slow-moving waters. It didn't take a mind reader to know he'd dredged up more painful memories. Naruto decided not to pry further, at least for now. Well, we'll make sure it gets built. No petty criminals are gonna scare us away. Believe it. He gave the dejected bridge builder a thumbs up, hoping to raise his spirits. Tazuna returned a weary smile. Thank you, Naruto. The ever-present fog thinned out, revealing the entrance to a long tunnel that signified their arrival in Tazuna's homeland. When they reached the other side, Naruto gaped in awe at the sparkling waters and giant wetland trees. A series of wooden buildings on support beams dotted the maze-like boardwalk around the inlet. Kakashi hopped out first, then reached down to help Tazuna. Sasuke assisted Sakura, but Naruto flipped onto the deck before he could do the same for him. Sasuke chuckled. Show off. Home's right this way, Tazuna said, leading the group off of the docks and down a forest path. Some time later, an unfamiliar presence made Naruto nervous. Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke appeared to have noticed as well, and were reaching for their ninja tool pouches. A faint whistling in the air grew louder, prompting everyone to turn around. Naruto was quickest to act. He tackled Tazuna aside, rolling across the grass. Kakashi shouted a warning to duck just in time. A large metal blade sliced through the air, but arrived a moment too late to claim its target's head. The sword embedded itself into a tree at the edge of the path. An unknown man alighted on its protruding hilt from out of thin air, his back to Team 7. He turned to them with a sidelong glare. Kakashi strode toward the newcomer with his hands in his pockets. Snorting at the over-the-top entrance, Naruto stayed near Tazuna and focused his chakra. Well, Kakashi-sensei said with nonchalance, if it isn't the rogue ninja of the hidden mist, Zabuza Momochi. Sasuke and Naruto shared a look, watching and waiting in silence. Whatever came next, Naruto knew adapting to the situation would prove crucial to keeping Tazuna safe. A careful once-over revealed much about the rogue ninja before them. Naruto noted the bandages concealing the lower half of Zabuza's face. His baggy striped pants looked similar to clothes people from the Land of Water wore when they visited the Hidden Leaf. The spotted design on the man's wrist and leg warmers, however, was unique to him. Why would you bother wearing stuff like that if you're gonna walk around shirtless? Naruto asked himself, frowning at the guy. Naruto, Sasuke said, seizing his attention. Huh. Sasuke's eyes flitted towards Zabuza, and Naruto followed his gaze, taking in the silent signal. Words were almost unnecessary for the two of them, but Sakura looked between them in confusion. Realizing this, the young Uchiha approached her and whispered in her ear. While he relayed the necessary information, Naruto tuned back into the conversation with Zabuza. I assume you are Kakashi of the Sharingan, their new foe said. Hand over the bridge builder. Naruto turned to his brother at the mention of his clan's genetic trait, unsurprised to find his eyes fixated on Kakashi. You must be the one, Sasuke whispered, as if recalling a long-lost memory. The non-Uchiha Sharingan wielder. That's right, Kakashi said, reaching for the portion of his face covered by his headband. If it's Zabuza we're dealing with, I'll need to use this. He exposed his hidden Sharingan, taking a battle-ready stance. Zabuza turned to Kakashi, maintaining balance atop the hilt of his blade. Well, he said with a hint of intrigue, I never expected to see the infamous Sharingan so soon. This is an honor. A metallic wire darted between Zabuza's legs, looping past one of them before constricting around his foot. He looked down and gasped, stumbling and flipping off of the sword hilt in order to free himself. Sasuke pulled on the other end of the string, preventing Zabuza's escape. The mist assassin rolled in midair, breaking his fall with both muscular arms. However, he was unable to move from his grounded position due to the wire still wrapped taut around his leg. Naruto swooped in, taking the opportunity to toss a volley of kunai at the incapacitated man. Zabuza shielded himself as the ninja tools rained down. Despite his raised arm, the kunai lodged themselves into his body in several locations, drawing blood. This didn't last long. His body destabilized, turning to a gel-like substance before completely collapsing into a puddle of water. Hey, brats, his voice called from across the nearby lake. You missed. The genin turned to observe Zabuza, who posed casually atop the water. He chuckled, getting into a combat stance. Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi said with disbelief. I never expected that sneak attack from you. We wanted to see if this guy was all talk, sensei, Naruto said. He snickered as Kakashi stared back at him. Right, Sasuke. Not acknowledging Naruto's words, Sasuke whispered, damn. I was hoping we could land a hit early on. Sakura looked around, as shocked as Kakashi. She backed up toward Tazuna with a deep frown on her face, the reality of her inability to keep up sinking in. Tuning into this with near psychic awareness, Kakashi called out to her. Good job, Sakura. Stay vigilant and protect the bridge builder. Yeah, Zabuza said, his voice coming from another location this time. He's right. Sakura and Tazuna took a moment to process that he was no longer standing on the lake and that he sounded much closer. They turned around and gasped in horror. There Zabuza was, crouched at their blind spot, a murderous glare on his face. You wouldn't want something like this to happen. He seethed. Sakura lunged toward the assassin, kunai in hand, but was swatted aside by one sinewy arm. Kakashi dashed to intervene, catching her before she could slam into a tree. Sakura! Naruto shouted. Tazuna! Run! Rising to full height, Zabuza grabbed Tazuna by the throat. He lifted him off of the ground, applying pressure. The bridge builder's body twitched and, with a wet snap, went limp. No! Sakura cried, staring at the fallen body of their client. She sank to the ground, shaken by the sight before her. Kakashi stood by with a hand on her shoulder. A loud poof interrupted the gravity of the moment. What? Zabuza growled, watching as the fake Tazuna before him vanished. He searched the area for the caster of the Shadow Clone Jutsu, his previous confidence gone. The real Tazuna disappeared behind the treeline alongside Naruto. Sasuke smirked at the Jonin's rage. He called out to Sakura as she breathed a sigh of relief. Come on, Sakura, we have to protect them. Following his lead, She ran for the forest. Realizing what their plan was, Zabuza flew through hand signs, conjuring a wave of water from the lake and morphing it into the shape of a dragon. Kakashi stood in the way, mimicking his opponent's hand motions with little effort. He countered the technique with a water dragon of his own. How? Zabuza said, frozen in surprise. You copied my moves before I was finished. It's simple, Kakashi said as his jutsu crashed into Zabuza's. Water sprayed in all directions. I can see your future, Zabuza. Your future is death. The agitated mist ninja grunted. Figures they don't call you Kakashi the copy ninja for nothing. But don't underestimate me either. Droplets of water pooled together near Zabuza's sword, taking the shape of a replica of himself. The water clone wrestled his blade free from the groove in the tree, then tossed it at Kakashi's head. The leaf Jonin reacted without turning around. He fell forward, and with a rising back kick, sent the blade on an upward arc. Then Kakashi focused chakra into his hands and feet, pumped off of the ground, and followed up with a spinning kick to the tip of the sword's handle. Zabuza scarcely had time to dodge before the blade shot forward at an angle, embedding itself into the dirt behind him. Kakashi landed and returned to a neutral stance. Fog settled in while the two men stared one another down. I can see your moves, Zabuza. A blur of trees and shrubs flew by as Naruto hurried through the forest next to Tazuna, who led the way to their destination, one panicked instruction after another. Making sure to stay close enough that Tazuna could keep up, he mentally prepared himself to move at top speed if necessary. Zabuza was a Jonin, not just some weakling. His catching up to them was a very real possibility, even with Kakashi-sensei holding him off. If that happened, Naruto would have to fight like their lives depended on it to survive. Sasuke and Sakura's chakra signatures grew stronger by a small amount, but it was enough to bring a smile to Naruto's face. That meant his and Sasuke's plan worked. The others were on their way. They just might get Tazuna out of this mess after all. Sensing a sudden spike in foreign chakra, Naruto nudged Tazuna out of the way and raised his kunai to counter an incoming attack. A needle-like projectile punctured the tree beside him, and a few more came hurtling at him from behind the overgrown foliage. Naruto deflected the needles with near-perfect accuracy, dodging one that would have hit its mark. Then he put his all into tracking the assailant. It was no use. No matter how hard he squinted or tried to trace the unfamiliar chakra source, he was still unable to make out the location or identity of his attacker. The dense forest provided such effective cover that for all he knew, the enemy could be anywhere right now. Whoever they were, Naruto was pretty sure they weren't Zabuza. Stopping to observe what appeared to be common Senbon lying at his feet, he motioned for Tazuna to get behind him. The man complied, shriveling in fear. A voice rang out from within the trees that sounded much calmer than expected, given the circumstances. I would rather not kill a child. Please, hand the bridge builder over to me. Fat chance. Naruto shouted back. He bared his teeth. If you want him, you're gonna have to get through me first. Believe it. Very well. Please do not blame me for what happens next. You see, I have a mission I must complete. Oh yeah, Naruto said. Well, so do I, pal. A rustling in the trees overhead made Tazuna shudder. Naruto closed his eyes and took deep, slow breaths. The enemy might strike at any moment. A calm mind would help him to focus, as his mother used to say during sealing lessons. He stopped trying to isolate the enemy's chakra, prioritizing staying attuned to sounds or sensations that felt out of the ordinary. He saw nothing, felt nothing, save for the man cowering behind him. His sole purpose was to detect and neutralize whoever was about to strike. The stillness of the atmosphere was in direct contrast to the anxiety spasming through his body like pins and needles. Finally, the faint snapping of a twig behind Naruto alerted him. He tossed a marked kunai into the distance, then pivoted so that he was between the approaching threat and Tazuna. A masked ninja in a kimono was dashing toward him, but they disappeared before he could react. Naruto raised a kunai in anticipation of having to counter a body flicker-enhanced blow. Instead, hairs bristled on the back of his neck when he noticed a presence in the treetops. He looked up and, sure enough, the enemy was perched atop a tall branch. They flung another round of Senbon at Naruto and Tazuna, but not before the former activated Flying Thunder God to send his client to the discarded kunai. A fallen log replaced Naruto's perforated body. The enemy looked around, but was unable to find him. The snap of a twig drew his foe's attention, and they leapt from tree to tree, landing in a clearing near where the sound originated. Then a faint sizzling prompted them to glance down, where a large rock tagged with paper bombs was a fraction of a second from obliteration. The enemy flipped backward, but the chunks of rock that scattered from the epicenter of the blast pelted their mask, cracking it in two. Mask still intact, they paused to take a breath. A ring of trees surrounding the area were shaken by the blast and hailed a blanket of leaves amongst the rubble. Then a consecutive series of puffs shrouded the unknown ninja in smoke. They looked up to see that the many leaves had been replaced by several dozen Naruto clones, which were free-falling in their direction. Gotcha! They announced in a chorus of triumph, descending on Tazuna's pursuer. What happened next was difficult to process. The temperature dropped so fast that before any of the clones could reach their target, they found themselves immobilized. Ice coated their bodies and the air itself froze over, reducing their cheers to muffled grunts. A ball of frozen moisture expanded into a reflective mirror under the enemy's feet. They descended into the mirror and then it destabilized, leaving behind a puddle of water. Icy clones rained down on the clearing, most shattering on impact. The real Naruto watched from afar, having just managed to evade the cold snap before his hand froze. Still, movement was more difficult and he couldn't feel a thing in a few fingers on the affected hand. He rolled his shoulder, doing a quick check and finding Tazuna was still headed toward his destination deeper in the forest. Good going, old man. I'll catch up to you as soon as I take this guy D. Another ice mirror formed in an instant. If Naruto hadn't known how to sense for chakra spikes, the kimono-clad foe would have dealt far more damage to him than a cut on the cheek. They dashed past and did a quick heel turn to stop their momentum. Iced-over blades of grass crunched under their sandals. Behind Naruto, the second mirror turned to slush. He rolled onto his feet, cursing at the hit he'd taken. The enemy gripped a senbon between each knuckle, wielding them like a claw. So fast, it's like fighting Dad. I don't wish to kill you, came their filtered voice. Its calm, yet firm tone made the words almost more unsettling, but Naruto schooled his expression. Then just leave us alone and go back to wherever it is you came from. They raised their false claw, poised to continue the battle. I would rather not have to fight, but if you insist on getting in Zabuza's way, I simply must. That is my mission. I already told you, if you go after him, you'll have to answer to me. The wind picked up, causing their long black hair to sway to one side. This mission means a lot to you, doesn't it? Naruto paused, caught off guard by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Yeah, of course it does. It's my first away mission. There's no way some weirdo with a bunch of needles is gonna mess it up for me. The masked person hung their head, as if in reluctant acceptance of his resolve. You're a brave one, boy. Maybe in another life, you and I could have gotten along. They slid into a combat-ready stance. However, I must kill you. Go on and try it. Moments from engaging in one of the most dangerous fights of his life, Naruto smirked. Zabuza spiraled in midair, slashing a tall tree in two. Kakashi skidded to a halt out of range of the attack, a kunai in one hand. Balancing his blade in the dirt, Zabuza cartwheeled on one hand, gripped the hilt of his sword, and used the momentum he built to carry it upward. His strike missed by a hair. Kakashi backflipped to avoid the blow, stopping next to the lake. Nice moves, but you lose. Zabuza chuckled. I have you right where I want you. Something clamped around Kakashi's leg, and he flinched. Looking down, he realized Zabuza had created a water clone and hidden it underwater at some point during the fight. Damn it. He was waiting for this moment. Water prison jutsu. Zabuza's double shouted, letting off a rough laugh as he emerged from the depths of the lake. No. Kakashi spun around and grabbed for the clone's wrist, trying to deflect his gesture, but it was too late. A calloused hand grabbed hold of the Leaf Jonin's military vest. Moisture gathered around him and assumed a spherical shape, suspending the Leaf Jonin in midair. The barrier around him grew denser by the second. The mist ninja's copy stood with one hand in the water prison, smugness radiating from him. The real Zabuza stalked over to his prey. Both versions of him laughed, and the original lifted his sword. Looks like this is it for you, Kakashi of the Sharingan. One mighty swing cleaved the dense sphere, as well as Zabuza's water clone, in two. The assassin leaned into the momentum of his weighty weapon, taking a knee. He dug his blade into the dirt, lethal end first. Then he rose to observe his handiwork, and lost all composure. What? All that remained as evidence of recent events was a pool of water running off into the lake in a steady flow. No body, no blood, and there was no log as evidence of a substitution. His prisoner was gone. How? Cold steel ripped across Zabuza's body and he staggered forward, falling to his knees with a grunt. It's like I said before, Kakashi answered matter-of-factly, kunai in hand, your future is death, Zabuza. Nothing can change the outcome of this battle. Through visible effort, Zabuza managed to direct one trembling eye behind him, where he saw Kakashi perched in a crouching position atop the grounded hilt of his weapon. The former captive turned to meet his gaze. His hair and clothing were damp, but he appeared as confident as ever. What's that look you're giving me? Kakashi said with a coy tilt of the head. I'm going to kill you, Zabuza growled, pain slurring his words. You hear me? It's not looking that way. Kakashi placed a finger on his chin. Though I do have my sensei to thank for showing me how to do that jutsu. If not for him, I'm pretty sure you would have defeated me just now. Anyway, from there it was as simple as casting a replacement jutsu. Kakashi formed a series of hand signs. Zabuza tried to stand, but his legs buckled. He collapsed again, but pushed himself back onto his feet. Kakashi eyed the long diagonal slash down Zabuza's back, plus the quick tendon-severing blow he dealt in the same instant. There was no way the swordsman was still in fighting shape. Relief washed over the victor of the battle as he looked upon the state of his foe. Thank you, Minato-sensei. Your lessons saved me quite the hassle, and possibly my life. Kakashi extended one arm, channeling a current of his dwindling chakra until a mass of lightning enveloped his hand. Trying to keep this jutsu stable was like holding an exercising weight steady, with the added annoyance of an endless chirping in his ear. He stepped around Zabuza and stood over him, making eye contact. Any last words? Kakashi asked, his voice flat. Damn you. The mist ninja choked out. What the hell was that jutsu? It's called Flying Thunder God. As one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, I'm sure you've heard of it. Zabuza responded with a defiant growl. If I'm being honest, I've neglected to put time into practicing it after the 4th taught it to me. Kakashi shrugged. I'm as surprised as you are that the seal I placed on your clone worked at all. I'm not dying here, Zabuza spat, clutching tufts of grass in an apparent futile attempt to withstand the pain coursing through him. You are. Having heard all he cared to, Kakashi pulled his lightning blade-wielding arm back and widened his stance. He thrust forward at a downward angle, going for Zabuza's heart. Kakashi's exposed Sharingan enhanced every detail, ensuring his aim would be true. Frozen flakes fell like rain through the trees as Naruto crossed weapons with the masked enemy. He leapt from tree to tree, matching most strikes and evading those he couldn't. The pure ease with which this person kept up with him was shocking, to say the least. Dad's speed drills were in large part to thank for his not being full of holes. The two pushed off from one another, landing on parallel branches and taking a moment to rest. Naruto frowned at the sight of his enemy, who wasn't so much as panting from exertion. They leveled one frosted over Senbon, putting him on edge. However, no attacks came his way. You are skilled, the raven-haired ninja said. But I must not lose. That's my line, believe it. Naruto retorted, balling a fist. He paused when a chakra signal nearby alerted him to trouble. Spikes of pain radiated from the backs of his calves, sending him to his knees. He glanced back at two Senbon that dug deep into his legs, immobilizing him. Sure enough, there was a mirror in the distance. The masked foe was no longer in front of him. Their reflection stared back at him from inside of the mirror. When did they even start that attack? Worse than the piercing sensation in his legs was the devastating reality that even at his current speed, he might be outmatched here. Naruto ripped the Senbon out, gritting his teeth through the pain, then wobbled to his feet. Regardless of how bleak things were beginning to look, giving up here wasn't an option. Sasuke always said that no one was unbeatable. It was time to test that theory. I'm surprised you can still stand, the enemy said from within the ice mirror. As a sign of respect for your resolve, I'll grant you a swift demise. Naruto readied his kunai, but in the time it took him to raise the weapon, his foe vanished from the mirror. The crystalline structure fell apart. Tense silence claimed the forest once again. Naruto dropped to the forest floor and made a wide stance, keeping his back to a tree. Out of nowhere, a single Senbon flew at him from the side. He tried to dodge, but the enemy was too quick. The Senbon drove itself into his neck. His body seized and he lost all control of his movements. Stiff as a beanpole, Naruto took a hard fall, chin first. The impact left him dazed and confused until the moment he blacked out. The sound of the ice user's footsteps approaching his motionless body filled him with dread. Sasuke led the way through the forest, hopping from branch to branch with Sakura close behind. Naruto and Tazuna were moving faster than he expected. A couple of minutes into the journey, one of their chakra signatures blipped out of existence, then reappeared further away. Sasuke honed in on the isolated signal and grunted in recognition. He glanced over his shoulder mid-jump. Sakura. She blushed and wiped hair out of her face. What is it, Sasuke? Naruto sent the bridge builder up ahead with Flying Thunder God. He must be in trouble. What? But Kakashi-sensei's already fighting Zabuza back there, right? He must not have come alone. It would be a smart move. The Uchiha clicked his tongue. To be honest, it was stupid of us not to expect something like this. So what do we do? Sasuke let the moment hang before he replied. If I know that idiot, I'd guess he wants us to go on ahead so he can fight alone. But that's dangerous. Why would he? He narrowed his eyes. He's Naruto. Good point. Anyway, you go ahead of me and meet up with Tazuna. I'll split off to check on Naruto. When she took too long to answer, Sasuke turned back to find her brow wrinkled in concern. Got that? Are you sure? What if he's fighting another Jonin? Sasuke stopped, and Sakura settled on the branch beside him. He turned to her with a hard stare. Look, Sakura, no matter what kind of threat it is, our primary objective is to protect the bridge builder. The longer we debate this, the more danger we could be putting him in. She frowned, but didn't object. I understand. Be careful, Sasuke. Sasuke nodded and darted in the direction of Naruto's chakra signature. Behind him, Sakura continued on as instructed. Whoever Naruto was fighting was giving off a stronger signal. Did that mean Naruto was losing? Sasuke put a bit more chakra into his feet, increasing his speed. When he arrived, a stranger was walking over to Naruto, who lay motionless in the dirt. Whatever happened to him, he seemed to have been rendered unconscious. The enemy ninja wore a mask and kimono. Upon seeing them lift a hand armed with Senbon between each finger, he flung a flurry of shuriken to ward them off. The foe shimmered away, standing a few feet from Naruto in silence. Sasuke landed beside his brother and shook him with one hand while keeping an eye on the new variable in this situation. Naruto, are you alright? Wake up. I haven't killed your comrade, said the masked ninja. Not yet. Sasuke glared, running through dozens of potential scenarios in his head. He didn't know this person's jutsu or capabilities, so he couldn't be certain how a direct confrontation might end. If whoever this was had taken Naruto out, that meant they were no pushover. You're probably wondering how best to defeat me right now, aren't you? They lowered their clawed hand. I don't like to fight, but I will if I must. Maybe you are more logical than your friend here. Take him, and the girl who was with you a moment ago, and leave. Sasuke's blood ran cold. He'd assumed Sakura was far enough away not to be noticed. If you give me the bridge builder, they said, I won't end your lives. Stay out of Zabuza's way. Using the time they allowed him to consider the proposal, Sasuke leaned down and pulled an object free from Naruto's neck. It was a Senbon. There was blood on the tip. Hoping with everything in him that it wasn't poisoned, Sasuke turned to his foe. He drew 2 kunai, holding one in each hand. I have to hold them off until Naruto wakes up. There's no way I can carry him and fight this enemy off. I see you have made your choice, they said with a tinge of sadness. Very well. They closed in fast, swiping with the clawed hand. Sasuke ducked under the strike and sliced through the assailant's ribs, or so he thought. His hand felt nothing but air. He looked around, but his attacker had vanished. Sasuke's heart threatened to beat out of his chest, but he refused to back down. He couldn't. If he did, the mission would be a failure. Even if he managed to survive, he would never be able to face his comrades, Lord Minato, or Lady Kushina again. Most damning of all, someone who was that much of a coward didn't deserve to have survived the Uchiha massacre. Every sight, sound, and smell in the forest seemed amplified as fear set in. Sasuke gripped his weapons tighter, centered himself, and focused. He needed to rely on his training now more than ever, or he and Naruto were as good as dead. Waiting until he sensed the enemy's presence again, Sasuke rolled forward. Wind brushed the top of his head as their sneak attack missed, and he took the opportunity to slash at their exposed leg. Sasuke rose to his feet. The enemy stood a few paces away inspecting their kimono. There was an unmistakable tear in the fabric above their left foot. Even with a mask on, their surprise was palpable. Due to my speed, few are able to keep up with me. But you and that boy have both managed to do so. They switched into a combat stance. I wasn't using all of my power, but even so, it is impressive. I guess you counted us out too soon then, huh? Sasuke smirked. Come on, Mist Ninja. Let's finish this. While he wasn't certain he could back those words up, he thought it best not to show weakness of any kind right now. The enemy all but glided forward, reduced to a blur, and delivered several cat-like slashes. Sasuke did his best to block and parry, but was beaten back by the force of the strikes. He tripped over a root on the forest floor. Capitalizing on his vulnerability, the foe tore him to shreds, then stared in shock at the chunks of wood that took his body's place. Taking advantage of the element of surprise, Sasuke charged in with a spinning kick. He missed by an inch and his foot landed in the crook of an aging tree. Minato's speed training was a godsend, but even so, it was fast becoming apparent that this person was on another level. You can't defeat me like that. I wouldn't be so confident. Sasuke shot back, using the tree as a support to spin sideways and toss one of his kunai. They snatched it out of midair without flinching, then examined the hilt, where an inactive paper bomb was applied. Your friend tried this trick earlier. The masked ninja flung the explosive away, then formed hand signs. Sasuke grimaced. He didn't know this sequence. Whatever the jutsu was, it had to be bad news. He threw his second kunai to stop them from completing the signs, but they finished in time to catch the projectile yet again. Too slow, they said in an ominous, monotone voice. Sasuke smirked and pulled hard on a metallic string attached to the end of the kunai. The mist ninja was thrown off balance and fell forward into the path of a powerful backhand. They brought an arm up to absorb the blow, only to be knocked off of their feet. Sasuke charged in for a follow-up attack as the enemy rolled into a kneeling position. A chilly breeze picked up and a mirror made of ice materialized behind the enemy. They stepped backward, into the mirror. Sasuke's incoming punch arrived too late. His fist smacked harmlessly against the ice. A reflection of the enemy stared back at him from within the mirror. Sensing an uptick in their chakra, he distanced himself and braced for an attack. Instead, a series of identical mirrors materialized among the trees. Sasuke whirled around, losing count of how many there were. Some were at ground level, and others floated as high as the treetops. The Uchiha deflated at the realization of the scope of his adversary's abilities. It wasn't like he was accepting defeat, but fighting someone like this and saving Naruto at the same time felt next to impossible. How could he? No. There's one way. Sasuke returned to Naruto's side, weaved the signs for a fireball, and sucked in a breath. He directed the flame at the closest mirror, using the obstruction in his enemy's vision as a window. Dropping to one knee, he nudged Naruto again. This time, The blonde groaned and lifted his face from the dirt. Sasuke, he rasped, taking a moment to register what was going on. Naruto, send us to Tazuna, now. There's no time to exply. Sasuke paused to whip out a kunai and deflect a flurry of Senbon. They'd come flying at him through the mist and smoke left behind by his fireball, which failed to melt the ice mirror. Just do it. I won't allow you to escape, said a chorus of voices. Sasuke looked from mirror to mirror. The enemy's reflection was in each one. Naruto got to his feet, rubbed his neck where the Senbon struck him, and joined Sasuke's side. Damn, that bastard got me in the neck. He hissed through the pain, going silent for a moment when the Uchiha boy turned to him. Hey Sasuke, your eyes. There. His speechlessness gave his brother pause. Sasuke touched his face out of reflex, brushing his fingertips against his eyelashes. Now that Naruto mentioned it, there was a marked difference in the acuity of his vision. He hadn't noticed the shift due to being so caught up in the heat of the battle. Taking stock of the changes, Sasuke realized that the most minor details around him, dust particles, moisture on the leaves of trees, and even the imperfections on the skin of Naruto's shocked face, were visible in exquisite detail. My Sharingan manifested. Looks like he was right, after all. He and Naruto stared at one another with looks of mutual recognition. The mist ninja zipped toward them at high speed from a mirror in their blind spot. Sasuke gasped, but noticed the danger too late to react. His awakened eyes could only watch as the enemy's arm swung forward to deliver a killing blow. Not enough time. His body moved on instinct, placing him between the enemy and Naruto. There was no question of who should fall here if evading the attack wasn't possible. Sasuke closed his eyes, envisioning those especially important to him, both sets of mothers and fathers he'd been fortunate enough to have in this lifetime, his godmother and godfather, and even the overconfident goofball he was about to die for in this forest. Two sandaled feet flew onto the scene and planted themselves in the side of the enemy ninja's face when they were an inch from striking Sasuke. The momentum sent them careening into a thicket. One half of their mask broke away and clattered to the forest floor as they fell. Naruto and Sasuke gawked at the sight of none other than Genma Shiranui, one of Minato's personal guards. He stood tall between them and the would-be assassin. Per usual, he was holding a Senbon between his teeth. You alright, boys? Genma asked without taking his eyes off of the enemy. Yeah, Sasuke said, wiping his brow. We aren't hurt. He blinked and noticed his vision had returned to normal. It stood to reason that the Sharingan had deactivated after Genma eliminated the threat. You Uncle Genma, Naruto forced out, still stunned. What are you doing here? Your father sent me. When he received word of the change in mission status, he got worried and sent me as backup just in case. Now get going. The unmistakable smile in his voice gave away how eager he was for the battle. I'll take care of this. The enemy froze in their tracks, one hand over their mask to keep it from sliding off. Their single visible eye widened and they muttered, Zabuza. Naruto exchanged a concerned glance with Sasuke. The ice user made signs with their free hand, dispelling all mirrors except the one at their rear. Genma spat his Senbon toward the foe at a deadly speed, but they disappeared into the mirror just in time. The moment their body was absorbed into the icy surface, the mirror melted, taking with it any trace of its creator. Lightning screamed down from above. Zabuza tensed in anticipation of the killing blow as Kakashi thrust his lightning blade forward, but something stopped the Leaf Jonin's arm in its tracks. He stared in confusion at a pillar of ice rooting him in place. What the? A low, taunting chuckle made Kakashi's spine tingle. He looked down to see a confident glint in Zabuza's eyes. A new presence had joined them in the thickening mist. Zabuza, are you alright? Asked a calm voice. I'm alive, Zabuza said through his laughter. Good work, boy. Let's fall back for now. Kakashi pressed a hand against the pillar and wrenched his trapped arm free. Blood trickled from where the ice scraped against him, but he had other concerns. When he turned back, Zabuza was gone. He no longer sensed the chakra of the person who saved him, either. Powerless to do anything more, Kakashi rested his hands on his hips. Damn.